apologise in advance. I have a little dog who is very unhappy about not being involved in this. So if you hear any squealing, it's the dog. Sorry.
What's the name? Hello there. What's the name?
Little Klaus. He's a miniature schnauzer.
Is he or she? He or she?
He's a little boy.
Hello there. Hi. I'm a friendly face.
But yes, he wants to be. He wants
a piece of the action. You know what, Natasha? I've had that many pets joining their owners, intrigued by who is this funny-looking man on the screen. So they're all wanting to find out who their owners are talking to. So that's absolutely fine. No worries. Yeah.
He wants to be in the middle of everything.
Yes.
And I've got a weird slideshow coming up here. Let me just change my display settings.
Oh, wow.
What presenter being slideshow? Hang on a minute. I think this is because I have two computer screens. Sorry. Try this again. Aha. Okay. Hi everybody. I have decided for my presentation I wanted to think about speaking, listening and communication. The logic about that is that currently I do most of my speaking and listening as a discrete component. We do it all in preparation for the assessment, and every year the students get really freaked out. A lot of them don't like speaking and listening, and when we get into that area, some of them will not turn up at all, some of them will just be switched off, and some of them they feel nervous, they feel under pressure. When we get into the assessment, lots of them really struggle with asking questions. It falls out of their head. A lot of them, when they're answering questions, they give me they give each other like one-word answers, and then the conversation just falls flat and it's dead. And on the higher levels, a lot of them struggle with presentation skills. A lot of them rely on reading word for word off the screen, which obviously is not a great presentation if it's done that way, and it's not fluent. So what I wanted to look at to extend in my practice is to try and embed and interleave speaking and listening skills a bit more throughout the year. The idea was to get them to sort of practice like mini versions of some of the skills that they need, make speaking and listening in English feel more normal and less of this big intimidating event. I also am sort of looking for ways that the learners can evaluate their own skills or other people's skills without it being super embarrassing. So that's kind of where I've gone with this, and I've sort of pulled some ideas from the training that we've had, also some other stuff from other places as well. Okay, so first of all, I was thinking about how I could bring speaking and listening into starter activities, and these are three ideas I came up with. So the first one is something we used to do when I was in teacher training. I originally trained to be a drama teacher, and often we would start lessons by saying, today I feel like a, then we have a category. So it might be a musical instrument, it might be a food, it might be a celebrity. And I really liked that because it gave me and the other students an opportunity to check in with each other's well-being and mental health. So if somebody says, I feel like that trumpet goes wah wah, you kind of have a feeling of where they're at. It also gets students used to speaking quite briefly because you're not asking them to say a huge amount, and also you're sort of touching on metaphor and simile, because if I feel like an accordion, which is the way I mostly feel, it's because I'm loud and sort of annoying, and so the metaphor is there. Yeah, so I really enjoyed that when I was drama teaching, so I thought it would be a neat one to bring into as an English starter from time to time. Another one I thought might be good for starters was using ambiguous phrases and getting students to select meanings. So looking at tone of voice, stress, that sort of thing. So the one that I use when I'm teaching it discreetly is haven't seen you for ages. And I talk about how somebody might say that if they are, seeing their best friend who's been away, versus how a teacher might say that to a student who hasn't been turning up to class. So I figured I could do something around an ambiguous phrase, using a particular tone of voice, and get the students to use clickers or the Socratic app or something else like that, possibly even whiteboards, to say which of multiple choice sort of tones or sort of context they think that that phrase belongs to. The other one that I've got, and I haven't tried this, but the idea came to me, was to get people to answer the register in a particular style or tone. I don't know how other people do the registers, but I always call the register. I don't do it looking. So they're going to have to do that for me every week anyway. So if I said, you know, answer the register like you're miserable, or answer the register in a really formal style, or what have you, that's a good way again to think about keeping people conscious on how they use tone in speaking and listening, and it doesn't take up a huge amount of extra time, and it's fun. My only sort of proviso for that would be that it probably works best for friendly groups where everybody gets along and where everybody's up for it. It would be a bit awkward and embarrassing, I think, for students if the attitude of the group was not the right fit for it. So yeah, so those are a couple of ideas I had for starters. I thought about speaking and listening as part of a reading lesson. So for that, the first one I had was about asking questions verbally about the text. That's the student doing the asking. So they could do it in small activities. It's going to help them with the comprehension, but also they're going to be practicing question and answer technique. And if students really were not confident, I could give them a few minutes to jot down some questions first, because that's, you know, that's going to help with formulating the question and not feeling too under pressure. And then sort of as time goes on, maybe they could more about, you know, more sort of off the cuff. The other idea which I know came up in the training was about hot seating, and the idea I had of using hot seating for reading lessons would be for them to work in pairs or small groups, where one student takes the role of the writer of the text, and the other students can ask them questions about what was the purpose of the text, what did you mean when you wrote it, why did you choose those features, that sorts of things. So you're covering then your purpose audience, etc. But you are also practicing your question and answer technique. The other idea, which I think again popped up in the training, was about translating text verbally for a different audience. So taking short texts or even just keywords, and sort of translating them verbally into something that would suit a different audience better. I could also bring in a link to code switching, which has got an equality and diversity link. I'm really interested in code switching. So anybody who's not familiar with that term, because I think it's a fairly American term, that is the idea that people switch between their sort of more formal ways of speaking in the workplace and in other sort of professional situations versus how they speak at home. But there's often sort of an equality and diversity element in that people, sort of non-white people, are often expected to code switch more and things like that. So I think it could be pulled in with a bit of equality and diversity, which could be interesting. So thought about then speaking and listening and how that might fit in with the writing lesson. So people talked about selling a useless object. I love that activity. I've done it myself in training sessions, but I've never done it with students. And then I got to thinking, could you get students to sell an English concept? So my students really struggle with apostrophes. So could I get them to give me a presentation or a short sort of talk that sells the apostrophe, or perhaps that sells something like bullet points, something, you know, paragraphs, things like that. And, you know, if I wanted to make that a longer, more extended activity, I could get the audience to ask questions as well. So I thought, you know, that could be a fun twist on a classic. This next one is not really probably going to be super relevant to anybody except for me, sorry, because I teach mostly to IT students, and I started thinking, because I'm learning in my own studies, I'm learning about programming, and the thing about computer programming is it doesn't work unless you use the right words. It doesn't understand what you're asking it, and unless you use very particular words. And I feel like there's a parallel there for a lot of my students who, especially in the higher levels, are doing a little bit of programming. They're not sort of discouraged or offended by the fact that the computer program only understands certain words. So I figure that's maybe a good analogy for formal and informal speech. And again, it ties into your audience. The one which I think Joe mentioned when we were talking about features of the text was to have cards with different language features on, and maybe get one student to explain, and if possible name the feature to their partner. So on the card you might have an example, like a quotation or what have you, and then the other partner will explain why that's been done that way, and if possible sort of say what the name of that feature is. So that could be a bit more asking questions and talking in that respect. So more generally, as part of any lessons, there are a few other things that came up. I quite like red, yellow and green cards. I use them for quite a few different things. One of the things I've never done them for is to sort of manage how people contribute in discussions. So one of my sort of weak points as a teacher is I'm quite happy to let the talker talk. And I feel sort of funny about putting too much pressure on the quiet ones to talk. Maybe I could do something with cards, either with a tick card where it sort of says you need to speak 3 times in a group discussion, and as you speak you pick them off, then you've done it. Or with red, yellow, green cards, so that the biggest talkers maybe get a red card, the ones who are in the middle get a yellow, and the ones who are really quiet get a green card, so that it reminds them how much I expect them to contribute, and perhaps these could change every week. So there are ways of sort of managing for me session by session how much I expect different learners to contribute. I mean, I'm really conscious of not making quiet students feel under pressure, but perhaps this might be a way to do it. Another thing that could work in any type of lesson would be to get them to do a short presentation based on the lesson topics, using images and diagrams but no text. That will hopefully help them build with turn taking, and again, there's room for question and answer. Obviously group presentations take time to prepare, as we all know from the session, but perhaps it's something that can be set as a homework. The other thing that I think is really interesting is tying speaking and listening into equality and diversity, which I mentioned a little bit earlier with code switching, but I'm also quite interested in in-group and out-group language, why we have different languages, and I think again we can tie that into equality and diversity. So one of the ones that I sort of found a bit out about was AAVE, which is African American Vernacular English. So it's a bit more American focused, but it is really fascinating the fact that AAVE has grammar structures that are comparable to standard English, but as recently as the 90s, the education establishment did not know that was the case and thought it was just people speaking any old how. And then you look at things like Polari, which and if you already know about it, I'm probably already telling you what you know, but if you don't already know about it, Polari is the language that gay people used, especially sort of pre kind of criminalization, and that language was necessary so that you could have conversations with people without risk that somebody would potentially overhear you and get you arrested. So I think I am super sort of interested in the idea of different ways of speaking as being equally valuable but useful for different things. So I think all of those could tie in for pretty much any session. Thought about plenaries. Again, I sometimes struggle with plenaries. The Feynman technique was the one that Sunil was talking about, which I'd not heard of before, but I like it. So maybe getting everybody to verbally say one thing that they learned at the end of the lesson. And I've sort of given my ideas a bit of a get out for that, which is that if you can't think of anything, because I always get, when whenever I ask students questions, I always get a certain chunk that go, no, no, no. And maybe they get out for them to say, if you can't think of anything you learned, ask me a question instead, or ask your classmates a question. The other idea I had was that each learner would ask a question about the lesson's topic that their partner must try to answer, or even if there's more time, maybe you could go around the room and everybody asks a question and the person next to them has to try and answer their question, and then they ask a question and the person next to them has to try and answer theirs. Again, I think I don't know how much that will work without giving it a try. The last thing is the idea of a verbal summary. So maybe at the beginning of a lesson, I could assign 3 students, and so for a sort of 90-minute lesson, maybe I could say, student number 1, I would like you to, by the end of it, give me a verbal summary of the first half an hour of the lesson. Student number 2 of the second, the second part, and student number 3 of the third. If I warn them of that at the beginning, and then they know they're going to have to sum it up, possibly they might pay attention more. And also, again, it's practicing with the speaking and listening. You could have different students every time you do it, so that it's not always the same people having the heavy lifting. So the last thing I thought about was homeworks, because obviously we're now in a position where we've got to start setting homework. I'm going to be honest, I occasionally set homework for my students, but because not many of them do it, it's never been a big part of my practice. So I'm kind of going, what can I do for that? So I liked, came up in discussion earlier in the session, I liked the idea of who's your favourite communicators, and I think for most of them that's going to be YouTubers. So perhaps I could produce them some kind of a gapped question, a gapped handout, or a gapped sort of digital thing that they could fill out. That's about why do they like the ways that people speak. So my favourite communicator, which is probably not very classroom appropriate, is I like Malcolm from The Thick of It, because he's got a Scottish accent, which I think is brilliant. He speaks, very, very quickly. He swears, but he swears in a way that's really creative, and he's kind of charismatically offensive. And it would be nice for the students to be able to talk about who their favourites are too, and what their communication style they could borrow or channel when they're speaking and listening. Somebody else in the group also said about talking to Alexa, so maybe again that could be a homework, is to go home and talk to your Alexa or your Google or Siri, see if they can understand you, to see if you had to repeat yourself. Again, maybe I could set a few questions to evaluate how that went. And the last one, which I think is pretty much a staple, is getting people to go home and watch a famous speech on YouTube and maybe think about how it made them feel, and then unpick how it made them feel, what it made them feel. So that was kind of an idea, and again, I could sort of send them home with a digital or a paper sort of question thing to fill out relating to that. So that is my full presentation. Obviously, haven't really covered absolutely everything you could do in the classroom with speaking and listening. I just kind of wanted to gather together a bit of a grab bag of ideas, because at the moment, I do think there's a lot more I could be doing. So yeah, that's me pretty much.
Thank you very much, Natasha. Well done. You've gone well and beyond over the brief.
Sorry.
No, honestly, it's fascinating. I'm glad I've recorded it for my own use, in terms of picking up on some of your ideas.
Yeah.
But fantastic. We've got some very, very good comments from the rest of the group. But you've got an extremely good handle on all of this. I think your previous training, particularly in drama, I think that definitely has a massive impact and influence there.
It has its moments.
Brilliant. And you've also picked up, and that's what they do in ESB, in the English speaking board exams. They get them to really act out some of the information, the text, through verbal exposition, expressive delivery, use of tone, expressions, all sorts of things. And it really helps them to act it out in their comprehension and their own expression. So well done there, Natasha. Thank you very much. So brilliant. Now the next group, please. So next one, I believe, is going to be Ross.
Yes, am I good to jump straight in? Me, Joe and Josh?
That's it. Please do. Yeah. You guys go
Fantastic.
for it.
Right, let me just get this PowerPoint up. I'm just going to do the screen share thing,
Thank
and
you
we
very
should
much.
be good. Okay, can everyone see this?
Yes.
Right. Is that all good? Everyone can see
Yeah.
in here?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to try the F5 thing and we will jump straight in. Okay, so thank you everyone for being here. This, myself, Joe, and Josh, we've been talking about aspects of writing, and we've been focusing on individual components of that, of how we can get students more engaged when it comes to preparation for the functional skills writing exams. So my focus has been fostering self-efficacy in writing through humour and absurdity. The new reform placed an emphasis on writing a range of texts to communicate information, ideas and opinions using formats and styles suitable for their purpose and audience. This is what we need the students to achieve. Lots of barriers and obstacles in the way of achieving this. Most notably for myself in my teaching practice has been self-efficacy. Some familiar quotes for you here. I find that so many students, whether it's due to a lack of positive reinforcement or a lack of positive reinforcement in over the past education, or preconceived notions that they cannot write, that it's impossible. They have no self-belief. They have no belief in their own ability to succeed. So I've been thinking about methods, techniques, needs, resources that one might use either in class or virtually to tackle these learning barriers through what Sunil has mentioned before, about adding a bit of humour, a bit of wackiness and absurdity, I think can go a long way in the teaching of writing. Yes, we can essentially teach to the test. We can provide multiple choice writing tasks pertaining to current issues like homelessness, climate change, discrimination. We can get them writing shopping lists, reviews of their TV shows, anything like that. But we then risk losing engagement through repetition of activities. And when it comes to self-efficacy, I've noticed in my training and my first few years of teaching that it has a positive relationship with creative confidence. However, I'm aware this is often difficult to cultivate, particularly in the more disillusioned of students. So every now and then, why not drop one of these in to spice things up? In class or virtual, this should keep the learners on their toes. So I have a huge deck of prompt cards, about 100 different prompt cards with what if scenarios. This can contribute well if you've been working on a glossary of language techniques, how language is used in students' writing. Say you've just given them a little booster starter, you've given them 6 new language techniques, maybe adverbs, superlatives, metaphor, simile, whatever you want. And you then challenge them to see if they can use 3, 4, 5, maybe 6, all 6 of these new language techniques within a short piece of free writing prompted by one of these little cards that you give out to the students at random. If you want, they can pick and choose, they can have a look through the deck, but it's more about spontaneity and just jumping straight in. These are all ridiculous scenarios, therefore there's no real quibbles of, oh, it's stupid, it's not real. Of course it is all stupid, let's just see what we can write about it. So you got stuff like, what if you were transformed to a slug overnight? What if moths were the size of kites? What if political decisions were made playing rock, paper, scissors? If anything, it gets people a bit more talkative, a bit more giggly, builds up the rapport, it keeps English light-hearted, as well as keeping it relevant to real world skills, which we try and dig out after 6 minutes or 6 to 8 minutes of free writing. Give a bit of observational feedback going round, and then we just talk about the decisions we've made. If we decide to write this as an article, as a letter, as a journal entry, as a bit of the students won't know what stream of consciousness is at this stage, but they will realize, some of them, that what they've created is a piece of stream of consciousness, and you can talk about that for a bit. Ties in very nicely with building up of the vocab, the terminology. So that's one. The Ross system. Little acronym, made my own name. I've used this once or twice to get students writing from memory and experience. This is also a good opportunity to reinforce hyperbole, use of figurative language for exaggeration, and also touching on structure. You can apply this to any sort of topic, any sort of theme, the best day ever, the worst day ever, holidays. The example I've gone for is storms and disasters. So quite simply, it is basically making students use hyperbole. They recollect, they pick a memory of a storm, if they can remember a hurricane being on the news, if they remember an earthquake, if they remember just a time when it was really, really, really rainy. They get the memory, they blow that memory out of proportion, make it cinematic, make it exciting. They think about how they structure it and how it could be sold, how it could be publicized, perhaps as a quality of writing. So from student X's verbalized idea, just a little memory about an earthquake breaking a vase in their house, filtered it through the Ross system. We ended up with broken glass surrounded us like hungry sharks as we lay drenched in the wreckage of our home. Finley was next to me, gasping for breath. They've gone as far as to anthropomorphize their own narrator. The narrator is a fish in a tank who's experienced this earthquake and his home has been shattered by the breakage. Little thing you can use there to reinforce figurative language. Time travel tourism is another good one. This is, in essence, it's a poster making session, but it's there's more to it than that. This is about advertising. This is about application writing. This is about sales pitches. It is persuasive writing. Now, this is something we need students to see as a superpower, as a secret weapon, rather than another bit of essential learning. It's all essential learning. This is the difference between getting what you want in life and the opposite. So we build terminology further, we build up the glossaries, more language techniques, focusing on persuasive devices. So once you've got, say, 10 new persuasive devices, we see how they put this into action in an advert for a time travel tourism company. We brainstorm on the board, periods that spring to mind. We have a little chat. We remind each other. Oh, right, what's it called? Where Henry VIII was about? What was the time period? What about the Ice Age? We remind each other. We feed each other with new ideas as a community. I like to sort of work with John Dewey's idea of the community of minds, as opposed to the one-sided classroom experience. And A3 paper goes around, coloured pens, everyone gets a bit of coloured pens, and we just have a bit of fun crafting these adverts as if we were creating publicized material for a business. And I think that's all I've got on time travel tourism. But yeah, we have a lot of fun with that. And this last year, I had a whole wall of time travel tourism posters on the walls. She was very proud of that. Room 101. Some of you will be familiar with doing this with your students. Room 101, quite easy to have a mess around with in class because everyone has a pet hate. Everyone has something they don't like, even if they've never heard of Room 101 or Orwell or 1984. Show them a clip on YouTube of the show. I always go to Robert Webb's edition where he's condemning the Jeremy Kyle show as the worst thing to happen to humanity, and it gets voted to be put into Room 101. It's another written activity that you can splice into the speaking and listening. I like to hybridize reading, writing, and communication as often as possible. And it's more developing of persuasive writing and also debating skills to some degree. So we brainstorm, we chat around ideas, we set off on a writing activity where they create a persuasive speech and they make a case for putting Jeremy Kyle into Room 101, for what's a ridiculous one? People who wear belts with joggers. There's one that stuck to mind. People who wear belts when they don't need to. They make a case for it. Most people's go-to is spiders. And this is where you incorporate a bit of debating. They give you their speech, and you, as the assessor, counter argues a little bit. So The most common example I can think of is spiders. They'll say they're creepy, they spin webs, they're horrible, they crawl in your mouth when you're asleep. You've got to come back with, well, they keep the house tidy, they pick off all the little bugs that we don't want to see. They're essential to the domestic environment. And but then it goes to a vote, and that sort of adds something else to the creative aspect and the communal aspect of the writing session. What have I got here? Oh, right. Why not think about Orwell while we're thinking about... Sorry, what have I put there? H.G. Wells. Why not think about H.G. Wells? Yes. I've had a go with some War of the Worlds session planning. The original broadcast is on YouTube in full. What you can do here is get students writing in response to a sound stimulus, fun way of approaching diary entries, letters, reviews, whole range of forms that they can experiment with, and it also requires a bit of role play. So the students are American citizens in 1938. Give them a bit of an impression to emphasize that, yes, it's the 1930s and we all talk like this in a stilted manner, seemingly with no self-awareness whatsoever. Obviously, we hadn't been playing around with broadcasting for very long. No one really knew how to speak on the radio. It's worth just talking briefly about periodic dialect. Play a section from the broadcast, just 5-6 minutes or so. I go to the bit where the cylinder opens, the Martian emerges for the first time. It's something I had to do in primary school. Set them off on a short bit of writing in response to what they witness on the air. It can be an entry to a diary. It can be a bit of stream of consciousness that aims to capture the panic or skepticism of the Martian invasion. And after some observational feedback, some reading volunteers, you skip to the end of the broadcast, revealing that yes, indeed, it was a hoax, an elaborate prank which terrorized the nation. Another good talking point there about the context of that event. And to finish off, you set them off on expressing their outrage through a letter of complaint to the broadcast company. Another chance to reinforce figurative and emotional language. I've put a little note down at the end of that slide to do with props. I sometimes use as a starter. You bring in a couple of random objects, a mystery object, a funny, an ugly hat, perhaps, with half a dozen or so options of writing tasks. It could be sell this hat. It could be write a letter of complaint to the eBay seller of this hat. It could be write a horror story involving this hat. And I get students in my functional skills groups who come in for drop-ins. I might have seen them earlier that day, but they come in for an extra hour, and they don't want to be doing the same material with me that they did earlier in the morning. So we send them off on some writing workshop materials that can be good for writing workshops. What else have we got? Travel and review. Let the phones work for you, using technology to our advantage here. We can read reviews on TripAdvisor on our phones. It's an exercise in trust as much as it is in encouraging freedom of research. We are reading to locate familiar language techniques, layout features. We are discussing anecdotally our own memories, our own experiences of good and bad holidays, and we are writing persuasively based on personal experience, based on what we've been discussing, based on what we've been reading. We are sewing together speaking, reading, and writing to craft the best finished product. And if anything, get them thinking about blogs, get them thinking about their own review accounts. Last year I had a few people create blog accounts from stuff like this. And finally, just as a little side optional extension task, you can create a little booklet. I've got a big fiction background. I like to sort of encourage students to think about it where they can. Another interesting aspect of writing that not necessarily ties into functional skills, but it's all practicing. It's all good for grammar, spelling, and punctuation. It's good for understanding that other side of literature. So I've got a booklet that I've put together. It's made up of dozens of character sheet templates, narrative step outlines, a load of writing challenges on the back. And you just set an open invitation for students to bring you finished pieces to return with detailed feedback and just work together on that additional part of their learning. It just encourages them to take more ownership of their learning and development. And Yeah, that's pretty much it from me. Just a few alternate methods there to mix things up. I understand they're not all particularly grounded in the real world per se, but they all link to real world skills, and it's just another way of getting the learners to have fun with their writing. In terms of self-efficacy, if we can get students to enjoy just one element of the craft, that's as good as it gets, really. So thank you.
Well done. Well done. I'm so glad you've talked about self-efficacy, because that's something that is highly teachable and so impactful as well. And yeah, as you said, some brilliant ideas that I think can easily be funneled into level, say for example, level 2 teaching, which is more kind of you know, aligned to the functional skills topics, but obviously you're coming at it from, you know, a GCSE perspective, which is fantastic. It would just need to be funneled into the level 2 context.
Of course,
maybe some of that would be level 1, but brilliant, fantastic, really good stuff there. Okay,
thank you.
So, thank you very much. So are we going to next? Is it Josh or
Joe?
Yeah, Josh or Joe?
Yeah, either or.
Okay, all right then. Josh.
I suppose I've sort of nominated myself there, haven't I?
That's okay, right? That's fine. That's okay.
Hi. All right then. Let me just grab my presentation. All right then. Can you see that? Okay.
Yeah, brilliant.
Wonderful. And may I just ask if you can hear me okay? Because I'm using some new earphones.
Yes, I can hear you. Great.
Lovely. All right then. Thank you very much. Thank you for that, Ross. I think colleagues have set the bar pretty high there. Thank you everyone for all your presentations. And I'd also just like to say before I start, I've really appreciated this whole facilitation. So thank you, Sunil. And it's been nice to speak to some colleagues as well, because we're very decentralized. I haven't really had the chance to meet a lot of you. So it's been nice to be introduced to some of you as well.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no worries. Okay, I'm just going to quickly dip into this then. So it's not reinventing the wheel as much as it is seeing that other people have already discovered the wheel and thinking, hey, this is great. These wheels are pretty good. We should use them. And it's just touching upon something that we were talking about the other day. I dropped it in the comments, and yeah, it's just a very quick and easy thing that we can introduce. This may help with a little bit of context. So Sunil, I'm not sure how much you're aware, but Nottingham College has had a pretty interesting year this year, and particularly so for myself because I'm new to functional skills English and I'm new to Nottingham College, so this is my first year.
Okay.
So my previous history was that I had been in a very high attainment public school with 99% A star to C. So needless to say, without being disparaging, there was a bit of a paradigm shift coming to functional skills in the city, Nottingham. So I had to think about how I taught things, and I think perhaps I was probably a bit more of a chalk and talk type draconian teacher, which I'm hoping to change, and some of these ideas have come into that. This year has been particularly interesting for Nottingham College because we've had strikes, we've had a change of exam board, we've had enrolment issues, we've obviously had COVID, and that's meant for some of us, myself and Miss Natasha P included, we've really had to push writing back, and my students haven't had as much writing facilitation as I wish they had or could have had. So I like an approach which is an early diagnostic tool for writing, that it allows me to inform my planning. That's the rationale behind what I'd like to talk about today. So in the middle of that is just this simple activity. And I'll share this with you. So this is an activity that I did very early in the year with my guys. And for a bit of context, I teach over at the automotive site. So my boys are all basically wanting to become mechanics. This is a very recognizable car to them, Nissan Skyline. A nice talking point to get them all on side and yeah, basically share some thoughts and get the group talking. And I put this activity up on the board, and it's simply this. David had to take his Nissan Skyline for a service. He was told that he needed to change the oil, replace the broken headlight, and get a new set of tyres. Sarah, the technician, said, "We can't let you back out until it's roadworthy." David had forgotten to look after his Skyline because he spent too much money on 6 new rims. And there we go. And I had used this in the past as a correction exercise, just for the punctuation, but I've rethought that a little here. So ordinarily I would have had that on the board and we'd have gone through some of the corrections, and it would have looked something like that after we'd adjusted it with the pen and passed that around the room. That's okay, but this occurred to me as a great resource to use to work out people's written ability, and that is to create just to narrate it to the group, not necessarily myself, but perhaps somebody else in the group, by removing the text, removing the visual element. So I take the text away, pair back just to the image of the car itself after we've had the chat, after we've got people talking, dictate the passage and have students listen to how it's dictated and write the passage themselves. And what that allows me to do is have one universal standard by which I can measure everybody's writing ability. And there are so many reasons why. It's such a simple idea that I'm sure people do, constantly, and it's nothing new, but the benefits to this are absolutely huge. I mean, for a start, it's a standardized assessment straight off the bat, and it's an initial diagnostic tool, so I can work out where people are with their writing and any issues that are coming up. And I particularly like this because I don't put too much credence on the skills forward diagnostic tool that we've used. I think that is a little off the mark, so it's nice to have those diagnostic measures in place. This technique would be very amenable to mapping and tracking, so it could very easily take the data that I get from this activity. If I was feeling particularly whizzy and wanted to go the extra level, I could go and put it in a spreadsheet into a tracking document of some type and see where people are falling down. For example, are people struggling with the homophones, and how many people have struggled with them? Do I need to, target my teaching towards that? And as such, it's a great tool to show a learning journey and A to B progression, which is good both for the students and also for our own practice, and evidencing our practice in terms of paper trails for whoever wants to come and observe or see the progression that the students are making. I've also mentioned that it's a synergistic approach, and I just think that it's a very simple tool, but actually it can be combined with lots of other practices. For example, it's something that'd be very, very easy to repeat for retention. I'll come back to that one. I'll circle back to that one in just a moment. It would be great for a flipped classroom because a student could come up and dictate the passage quite easily, which is good for their confidence, as we have already discussed ourselves, their oratory, speaking, and listening. They could pick their own passages, for example, from a car magazine of their choice or something that they're interested in. That would be perfectly acceptable. So as I've covered there, and it encourages reading itself. The passage could be audio recorded, which would be really useful for me because as that recording is playing, I can walk around the room and actually see what is being written and assess in that way. Interactive, yeah, it does. It lends itself to the smartboard in terms of turning it into a SPAG activity, as I had already devised it. But taking it as the written and the narration and the written activity, and then the SPAG activity means I get more mileage from a single resource, which is efficient for me. And finally, the multiple intelligences, just listening and developing those listening skills, rather than having to respond to something that someone's saying or constantly be bombarded with questions or even do something in a group. It's just different to just listen for a while and in that time quietly reflect and write themselves, which I quite like. Most importantly, the final point that I was just going to make is that it's really teacher friendly. I can see that this would be a simple technique. You could easily create a bank of, say, 10 of these that you've recorded, that you whipped out at any stage of the scheme of work as a starter, a main activity or a plenary. And I don't think it would be overly intensive in terms of man hours. And I think that the results could be pretty huge, especially in terms of distance tracking and discovering how far our learners have to go or have come. That's pretty much it.
Thank you very much indeed. Fantastic feedback as well. Thank you, Josh. You kind of took me back about 21 years when in the before we had all this electronic diagnostic stuff like Skills Forward and BKSB. What I used to do was I used to develop diagnostic tools which actually allowed me and my colleagues in my department to specifically identify which tenses the students are actually falling down on, looking at things like homophones, you know, where be quite specific. And then we used to then develop our individual learning targets based on the language. So it was very, very language specific in terms of the diagnostic. So well done there. I think that is great, and I love the use of the in terms of using it as a reading prompt. You know, the actual dictation exercise. I think that's fantastic. And also, I like how you're squeezing the lemon at the end. You're getting a lot of different activities out of it. So it's all connected. And then the learners can see that something like a diagnostic is not just a test. It's actually, there's like a lot of value inside it in lots of other things. And making that transferable beyond the English course to what they want to do in terms of their employability or personal ambitions of theirs. I think you're on an absolute winner there. Well done. Brilliant stuff. Thank you, Josh. Right, moving on then. The next one. Thank you, Natasha. I agree with you. But it is what it is. Oh dear, I like the good old days for me. Okay, then, right. So we're moving on then. Joe, I believe. Yes, is it Joe?
Yeah, hello. Right, let me
Hi.
share the screen. Oh, got lots on there. That's the one.
Oh, lovely.
Is that it?
Yeah, lovely, nice.
Right, okie dokie. So I'm early years background, so hence the PowerPoint.
Okay.
Why won't it? Under pressure now.
Do you want to
slideshow from
that's
beginning.
it,
There we
and
go.
then click beginning. That's it.
No, it's not.
Oh,
That's it. Why won't it? Does it F5?
current slide.
Slideshow from beginning.
You click current slide.
No. How strange.
Okay,
Oh,
you know at the bottom. Listen, you're at the bottom. Can you click projector? That projector icon. Can you click that?
where?
You know, right at the bottom. Can you see that projector icon by the Zoom? That's it. Click that.
Oh, brilliant. Thank you. Thank
Okay,
you.
right. No worries.
Yes, that's great. Right, let me just get rid of this chat. Right then, so I'm just going to do a little bit of an introduction of who I am. So I'm Jo Ritchie, obviously. I've been at the college since 2001. Started on my PGCE at Basford. So I started teaching level 3 psychology, sociology to mature care students, bit of forensic science, research methods, all of that sort of thing. And then level 1 childcare was introduced and I was asked to be a tutor. I thought, go on then, let's try something a bit different. Didn't know anything really about childcare, didn't know anything really about level 1. I just loved the aspect of the behaviour. So trying to get them on board and learning and developing their skills, building their confidence and everything. So that was years and years ago. Started on level 1 childcare. Then a few issues in English. So I said, right, I really like English. Can I have a go at teaching it, please? So they went, yeah, of course you can, have a go. And it's worked really, really well. Last year, or was it the year before, I had, do you know when you just have the perfect group? So I had the perfect group. They were progression students that I'd taught on level 1, taught them level 1 English, and I had them for level 2 English. And they would just, anything that I suggested, we just did it. It was the best class ever. And they all achieved level 2. I was so proud of myself and proud of them. So that's why I absolutely love teaching English when they get it, when they want to do it. I just love it. So as Josh and Ross said, we're looking at aspects of writing. So I've just really focused on one sort of aspect of writing, which I'll come to in a second. But the first thing, I really like words. I like the sound of words and words that we don't necessarily like. So I was hoping to introduce Word of the Week and put it outside everybody's classroom. And each tutor has a different word of the week and it gets changed. And then these students, if you hear them saying it, they get a point or whatever. I don't know how it's going to work yet, but I really like the idea of Word of the Week. So this is my word of the week for you. Do you know what it means? Anyone heard of glossophobia?
I've never heard of it.
So a way that you could teach this is, once we've explained what it is in a second. Does anybody else know it? Pop it in the chat. I've lost the chat. Anyway, it doesn't matter. So you could say, is this word a noun? Is this word a verb? Is this an adjective? So is it A, fear of confined spaces? B, fear of public speaking? C, fear of shiny paper? Or D, fear of paint? Go on, Sunil, what do you reckon?
I'm thinking probably paint because of gloss, maybe. I don't know.
Well,
very low frequency for me. I haven't got a clue.
It's actually B, fear of public speaking. I hate public speaking.
Oh, I didn't know that.
It's a good job you can't see me because I'm absolutely bright red. I'm shaking. It's just this response that I've no idea. When my manager says, right, you get up and speak your little bit, Joe, I actually physically start shaking.
Mm-hmm.
It's lesson observations are horrific. So I'm trying to manage. When I found this word the other day after we'd been talking about word of the week, I thought, wow, I'm going to use that one. So I really like that idea to get students their vocabulary, improve their vocabulary. I've lost my thread now. This is what happens as well. So this is what I really wanted to introduce you to. Pobble 365. Hang on a minute. I've gone off now. Oh no. Has anybody heard of Pobble 365? I can't see the chat and I've lost. Oh my goodness.
No, Joe, haven't heard of this.
No.
Okay, I've lost my PowerPoint now.
I haven't heard of it either, Joe, no.
Oh, I'm having real trouble now.
Don't panic, you're doing fine.
Hang on, I've lost my PowerPoint now.
So can you find the arrows to, did you want to go forward with the
There
PowerPoint?
we go. It's okay, I found it. It's fine. Thank you.
Okay.
This is what happens in lesson observations. I go all, ew. Anyway.
Just take a moment.
Okay, breathe.
Yes, and breathe.
So, Pobble 365 is all based around images. And I really like what you were saying, Sunil, about predicting what you think is happening.
Yeah.
So you could show the picture to the students because it's amazing. I was going to go on the website and pick a day that anybody chose. So you can ask them to go on and pick their birthday. And that comes up with a different image and different questions relating to that. So this is today. So today is the 2nd of July. So I had a look at the 2nd of July and this was the image for the 2nd of July. So I maybe would start with, what do you think's happening? And because it's an early years background, I can get them to look at the children. Where are the children standing? What's going on? How old do you think those children are? What are they doing? What's in the background? Imagine you're looking on that mountain. There's all sorts of different things that you can use. So based on the image, there are questions. So there's a sheet that talks about, that has different questions. So there are some questions there which I might do and cut that. I wouldn't maybe give them the questions like that. I would maybe give one pair a question, get them to discuss it, and then share it with everybody else. So it's sort of the speaking, listening and communicating that Natasha was talking about. Get them to come up with some good ideas, share it. What do they think? That would be one way that you can use the pictures in Pobble. Then another way is a sentence challenge. So using adjectives. So you've got a paragraph there. Use an adjective. So get them to work individually. What adjective would you use before brother? What adjective would you use before countryside, before front door? Maybe pass them around. Maybe come up with the best adjective to describe the brother or the jumper, or I don't know, you can come up with some wild and wacky and wonderful ideas. Other things that are on Pobble are story starters. So like you were saying about gap fill. So you could take out the word there in that first line as soon as their delivery and have there, and they are, and say which is the correct one, and then talk about the correct use of there. There's clouds I've underlined as well. So you could have clouds with an apostrophe in, or you could use words that end in Y, and then that's the plural because they get confused with words that end in Y, pluralizing them. And then you could say, what's the colon used for? Why are the 3 dots there? So that's to get them, like you said, about getting them into the story, getting them there. Then here at the bottom it says, then you could carry on with the story. So then they could write the story, or they could write a set of instructions. So what pieces would you get? How many pieces would you get? We're quite lucky to have individual Lego sets. So we could get them to make their Lego shape, then back to back describe it to somebody else while somebody else builds it. So it could be a whole lesson in involved in this one pobble day. They could draw a picture of what the house might look like. They could draw it together. There's all sorts of different things. I've just thought of another one that I like to do, getting them to write, and it's writing a story together. So on the British Council, there's an activity that starts with, it was a dark and stormy night. And you've got to do the character build up first. So you've got to give them a name, who they live with, etc. Then they all start the story the same way. So you dictate, it was a dark and stormy night, and then they put their person's name in, was, and then they have to finish the sentence. Then they pass their paper round, and each person has to write a sentence, and then you read them out loud, and they're absolutely hilarious. And that some of them are really good. They're so creative, and you have to really get their imagination flowing, I think, to get them writing. But I was introduced to Pobble about a month ago. Actually, no, we've been in lockdown 3 months, probably 6 months ago. And I was, wow, you can get so much scope from this Pobble. I love it. And I think
fantastic.
That is it.
Thank you very much.
There you go.
Well done. Well done, everybody. Well done, Ross, Josh, and Joe. Amazing. Got some fantastic feedback, Joe. I loved absolutely everything in that. Thank you very much indeed. Can I also mention, it's something that I do with the training of GCSE English teachers, but I think it might be quite relevant. If you are using storytelling as part of your pedagogy in the teaching of English in your functional skills sessions, if you think story building is actually a good way for them to learn about fluency and cohesiveness in writing. Not sure if anyone's heard of the Freytag's pyramid. Freytag. Freytag comes from Gustav Freytag, who's a famous novelist, German novelist, 19th century. He analyzed thousands of narratives and stories, and he came up with a pyramid, okay, kind of illustration where, for example, at the bottom, you start off with the setting and the scene, and then the characters, and then you got the event, and then you got the climax, and then you got the resolution bit. So you have a shape of a pyramid. You could present that to students to help them, and you could even attach examples of language to help them with the connectivity and the synergy to get them going with the storytelling, because that can be quite a powerful tool as well. But it just backs up what you're saying there, Joe. I'm really into story building with students, helps them to connect things together, and then they feed off each other as well, the one behind, and then they go forwards. Really good. But have a look at, I'll write it here. You can try and find an image of it on Google Images, or try Pinterest. But I use it a lot for teaching narratives for GCSE. But I think a whole narrative building as a technique as a teaching technique to help your learners with their fluency and their cohesiveness in their writing might be helpful. Okay, well done. Okay, moving on then. We're slightly behind time, but we should be fine. Okay, is it Shirley, Liz, and Vicky? Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay, Shirley, how's the internet going?
Not very good, so I'm going to get started because I keep losing it.
I know.
3 times already. Okay, so can you see my PowerPoint? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we sat and chatted, Vicky, Liz and myself, about how best to teach functional skills. And I've taught, functional skills for 20 odd years, and almost in every department in the college. And the one thing that really worries me is that the majority of students don't want to do English at all. So I've come up with this sort of idea of don't mention English. So for the first 6 weeks, my idea would be that you try to avoid mentioning the word English at all. And so what you do is you have some kind of a project or a theme-based task, and you would make it relevant to their course.
Yeah.
But what we would do is you would incorporate all the things that you've been talking about in the last 4.5 days, things such as Paula and Kathy spoke about this morning, and Joe and the various others have spoken about this afternoon. So you could choose a project, for example, design a new beauty salon, or a garage if you're a motor vehicle, or a computer game. a state-of-the-art gym if you were sports or public services, an art studio for Matt's lot, and a film set for the media, the creative. And the idea is that you give them something to think about. So in the light of what you were saying, Sunil, about avoiding using the text straight away, they could start with an image. So you could create all the tasks in a booklet. You could pin the booklet up in the classroom or have it on Interact or Classroom, whichever media storage we're all using at the moment or going to be using. Now, if they were more advanced learners, you could perhaps give them the whole booklet, and then they could be very independent. They could work on whichever task they wanted first. If you've got the more needy learners or the ones with anxiety, whatever their difficulty might be, you could maybe break the booklet up and give them a little bit at a time. Within the booklet, you could have open tasks for the more courageous, and there may be more scaffolded tasks for the less able, the less confident. So that way you're ticking all the boxes of EDI, stretch and challenge, differentiation, segmenting, and so on. So my idea is they would start by researching other salons or other garages, gyms, whatever the area you're working with is. They would then perhaps have speaking and listening, so that they would talk in pairs, threes, maybe come back as whole groups and discuss these salons or whatever it is that they've researched. So then you're bringing in your, like Natasha was talking about, you're embedding your speaking and listening, but you're not mentioning English at all or any kind of assessment. However, if they did it well, you could actually assess it as a proper speaking and listening, or it could be a good practice to give feedback from ready for the proper one. They could bring in their note-making skills, so they're not writing formally at this stage, they can write as they want. Now this would tie in with what Joss was just saying about assessment. You could then use those note-making skills to give you an idea of spelling, logic, all the things that they should or should not be doing. They could then, you could start to help make them independent, because they could make a priority list of what they've got to do next to design their own salon. And again, they could then come back to discussion again, so you could keep interspersing some writing, some researching, and some speaking and listening. And then gradually you could bring in the writing tasks. So they could research suppliers, and then maybe they've got to write a letter or an email to get information from the supplier, get prices, maybe whether they would offer discounts for bulk buying. So then you're embedding some maths. You're ticking another box there for Ofsted, because in English you're embedding maths. But now they're reading as well, because they're reading what the suppliers are offering. But they might be reading it more with broken down text rather than whole pieces of text. So again, we're gradually introducing the reading. The more able might look further, and so on. And then what you can do is you can use your predictions, Sunil, because they could write the letter back from the supplier, whether, you know, perhaps offer some discounts or whatever. So again, we're gradually building all the skills up, but all related to vocation, not to English. And so we're ticking the Ofsted brownie points here. So we've got discussion, we've got EDI, because they could look at, especially in hair salons, or if you were doing a new state-of-the-art leisure centre, of bringing in special areas for Muslim women. Because obviously if you've got a mixed salon, like my hairdressers is a mixed one, then traditional Muslim women obviously don't really want to take the hijab off if there are men present. So maybe they could think about that. Maths, because they're budgeting, working out discounts, etc. Real life, because are they going to have a bank loan to set up their new salon or garage? And of course, you can relate it all to employability, because this is real. Whatever vocation they're on, they might want to have their own salon or garage or film studio or whatever. And you're also bringing in health and safety and staying safe, because you've got all your equipment, dangerous chemicals, etc. And then obviously you can then develop it further depending on whether you've got level 1, level 2, or the entry students. Maybe write a speech to deliver one aspect of it, an article to put forward the pros and cons to other students, a report, a blog, and a presentation. I mean, the possibilities are endless. And you haven't mentioned English once yet.
Yes.
And I reckon this would last maybe 6 weeks, the first half term. But you could, during that time, get evidence from almost every aspect of functional skills.
Yeah, brilliant. Well done. Thank you very much, Shirley. That's amazing.
Sorry, I went rather fast there because we're getting behind, but also I'm just terrified this is going to drop me out at any moment.
That's amazing. It's a real winner, Shirley. Real winner. I'm a big fan of project-based learning, and it's not about tricking learners. It's just about showing them another way and something that will hugely benefit them and also maximize their participation. And it's fun and it's enjoyable. I've put in the chat box that I actually have developed a model for project-based learning, which would be quite good for embedding maths or English into anything without using the term. And for me personally, I tend to avoid using, again, Shirley, I tend to avoid saying English or maths with my students. I may say communication and calculation as nice little alternatives. So it's a bit more meaningful to the students. That was brilliant. Very, very good. Excellent. Okay then, thank you. Moving on then, the next participant, please. So,
right, hang on. I'm just going to stop and start again because, oh no, Vicky's going next.
okay,
and then I'll put the presentation up for...
Yeah, okay, that's great, Shirley. Thank you.
Hello.
Hello there, Vicky. Hi, you're right.
Hiya. I just want to say everyone's doing fantastic.
Great. It's amazing, isn't it? It's my favourite part of the course. With me being quiet.
Now, I'm very nervous because
everybody
on here teaches English. I teach hairdressing, so this is the whole course is completely over my head. I've been Googling every night. However, I do want to say to everyone, for those who teach the hair and beauty students, I really feel your pain because I know what they're like. So anyway, let me get on because I'm
Thank you,
waffling.
Vicky. Fair play. Thank you.
Okay, I'm just going to tell you what I think I'm using to start with before I do anything. So I think I'm using the DART, critical writing, speaking, listening, SPAG, phonics, and limitation of dominant speakers. And I think I'm also using the active and tired.
Wow, brilliant.
That's what I think I'm using. You can tell me if I'm not. Okay, so how I've gone with it, I've done it slightly different to you guys because you lot know, or can you see that on the screen?
Are you meant to be sharing your screen, Vicky?
Yeah, sorry.
Okay, if you can just press screen share and then...
Hang on a minute, I've lost you. I'm not very good at this.
That's okay. As long as you've got your document showing, it's open.
Where is the screen share? Is it the green button?
At the bottom, yeah.
Oh yes, gotcha. Yeah, right, okay. So let me see if I can get this up. No. Oh, here we are. Sorry guys, not mean, I'll go really quick. Right, so I've done it, can you see that everyone?
Yeah.
So what I've done is, I have gone on from what Shirley's done. So the first week I would be introducing this. Oh, this is the wrong one. So I'm so crap at this. I'm so sorry.
No, it's okay. You take your time.
Right, hang on, I've lost it all together now. Right, I'm just going to talk through the first one because it'll take me ages. The first one is basically an article, and they have got to sell the salon that we have in the college. So the hair article, so how I would do it, because I know my learners, they're not learners to sit down and listen and, do you know what I mean? That is not the environment they want to be in. So what I would do is I would take them for a walk around the salon. And what I would do is get them to notice the key features in the salon, to write an article to promote the salon. Now, how we do this is we do the walk around the salon. We'd come back together in a circle and we would discuss everything they've done. Then I would set a competition to who would write the best article. Okay. And then obviously at the end we'd regroup. I think I've got as much as I can get out of that without my PowerPoint. So that's what I would do with that, and that would just be, so they'll be covering speaking, listening, reading, writing. They'd be doing a bit of research into things. They would have to use probably phonics on some of the spellings like chemical. That's just one word off the top of my head. I'm going blank. Anyway, that's week 1, Sunil. That didn't go too great.
Yeah, very good.
So week 2, we'd obviously revisit week 1. Then this is week 2. So we've just done. Yeah. So basically, week 2. I think I've got the right one. No, I've not. Oh, right, hold on. Yes, so week 2, we have had a letter of complaint. Now, I've just, this is just basic, so it could be for a colour, a perm, anything at all, but we've had a letter of complaint. So what I would do is just write on the board, because I'm not really one for using boards because they hate sitting and looking at things. So I would just write complaint on the board. We would discuss that. Then I would put learners into pairs of 2 to springboard off each other. And what they would actually do with this is they would actually do a role play. So you've got one stylist, one client. They would take key notes on each other and discuss the complaint together at the end of role play.
Mm-hmm.
Then we'd regroup again in a circle, discuss findings, learners to take notes, so that's covering their writing. Complainers to regroup, so then the complainers would regroup with other complainers. And what they would do is they would have to devise an email of the complaint. So they'd again be covering reading, writing, spelling, and this would be handwritten, not on the computer. Okay, so they would have to do that. They'd spell check each other's, and then they would go on to using electronics and use the email. Non-complainers at this point, they'd be in pairs of 2, and they would research things of how to deal with complaints, and they'd also write a piece of work to say how they would deal with it. And then week 4, non-complainers to do an email to the complainers. So we've reversed roles now. Complainers to research and complete is addressed and to write a piece of work. So the complainers have to research how to complete and address what they've had in their email. I'm not doing great at this at all, am I?
Really well. Brilliant stuff. You wait till my feedback.
Hey?
You wait until my feedback. It's brilliant.
Yeah. So the regroup, the original complainers and the stylists, so we'd regroup in that, and we'd write a small piece on how they felt the response was handled. The non-complainer to write a report on their findings. So I'm really focusing, I think, on writing and listening, which is key to what they need in hairdressing.
Yes.
And then I would give the results of the competition from the first week.
Excellent. And
then on week 6, because we'd use it for 6 weeks, I'd discuss all tasks, good and bad, catch up on any outstanding tasks in the area, what went well, what didn't go well. They'd self-target, and they would, through all this, they would have to use their meaning and spelling books. We use them in hairdressing with theory anyway. And then what we would do is we would revisit the meaning and spelling books, and I would probably do a small test on spelling and the meanings of the words. And that's it.
Wow. Vicky, can I just say, well done. You did brilliantly. Can I ask you, did you say that you've not had much experience of teaching functional skills, or I've
never ever taught functional skills, never ever.
Well, you didn't sound someone like who didn't kind of know what they were talking about. There's some brilliant ideas there, fantastic, and you've clearly benefited from this course. And I think what will happen is more ideas will also come into play. Normally, when you do a big course, you need time to reflect on some of the things and then talk to colleagues as well. And then obviously you'll have the benefit of the videos to watch, you know, whenever you want. But lots of strength in depth there. I mean, I work with lots of vocational colleagues up and down the country, and yours is a brilliant model for embedding. And actually, it matches a model that this hairdressing academy I did some research with last year, where they wanted to have this similar project-based approach, everything around a particular task within the hairdressing. And in this case, it was about refurbishing a brand new room to make it into a salon and embedding English and maths. Now, what they did is they actually produced like a workbook for the learners, and it's mapped to the new standards. Is this something that you might find helpful, Vicky?
Yeah, I would actually, because I say
as part of your kind of, you know, reorientation or orientation into functional skills.
Yeah, I mean, I've been teaching a long time, and we used to embed key skills years ago.
Yeah.
So I suppose saying I've not taught functional skills is a bit of a fib. But I've never ever.
I'm gonna say
I've never actually had a functional skills English lesson. So
right.
I would not have a clue where to start if I had to go in and teach functional skills for English. But if I did, I mean, I'd only based it on hairdressing. I wouldn't have a clue about the others.
But then if you adopt, you know how you use the hairdressing theme, that thematic approach, and it infiltrated everywhere. That's exactly what you would do in a generic functional skills. Just find a topic that you can run all the way through.
Yeah.
I think particularly, Vicky, I think you will find that if you study the task-based learning framework, the TBL framework, and there's lots of examples on the British Council website of how you can use this task-based approach, which you're talking about with your presentation, but you can adapt it to teach functional skills in a generic functional skills setting, but keep it task-based. So your tasks will be things like your conversation, your presentation, your letter, your email, reading a whole piece of text. Then you run it all the way through. And then if you go on the British Council website, you'll see lesson plans, resources, assessment resources that are actually linked to the TBL. But what I will do is I will try and find that hairdressing work booklet, which I thought was outstanding. I think I'll put it on the Padlet. So
yeah, I'd love that.
You'll find helpful. And I'll also put my research project, which is alluded by Shirley in terms of project-based learning. And I think that is a major strength. That is a major strength for English teaching, for someone to come in and go with the theme, and then you find how it's relevant. If anything, you probably get lots of engagement because you're sticking with the theme. So well done there, Vicky. I knew you had strength in depth. I knew you had key skills there, the things you were talking about. So well done. All right.
Thank you so much.
That's all right. My pleasure. Okay, great stuff. Moving on then to, Liz.
Yes, it's me.
Hi, Liz. Sorry, thanks for waiting. Thanks for being so patient.
Okay. That's okay. I'm predicting fun and games because my internet's really poor. I've got 3 children and a dog that keep trying to interrupt me. So, yeah, let's just wait and see what happens.
Can I say hello to everyone, to the audience? Hello.
Yeah.
We're all behind you, Liz.
Right, so Shirley's got control of my presentation, so we're going to try and work through this.
Brilliant.
And I'm sorry it's a bit plain, but I realised I'd sent like an older version of it, so you're going to have to use your imaginations and pretend that
I'm good at doing that, don't worry.
Okay,
you can do anything.
Okay, so what I'm going to be talking about is I'm really going to be following on from what Shirley was saying about the task-based learning and how I would take that and apply it to my own students. So really, obviously, going from basics, I'd have to get to know who I'm teaching. So let's, for argument's sake, say I'm teaching level 1 functional skills and they're taking a level 1 public services course.
Yeah.
There's loads of those spiky profiles within the group, and a couple of learners have ADHD. I've found out that they love team building activities and they learn better when they take an active role in lessons. So now I can take that knowledge and begin to think about my ideas for my topic. So I'm going to take that holistic approach. So the idea of that reciprocal learning, and try to also make it alive, so that accessible, linked, inclusive and engaging, hopefully. So the unit, I would see it as lasting a half term, and I think it really lends itself well to that first half term. So for example purposes, because my students were public services and they like team building, they're going to be planning, I'm going to plan this unit about them planning an overnight trip to an activity centre, which is going to provide them with team building exercises. So the unit will be made up of main tasks like research, letters, emails, whatever. And leading up to each of those main tasks will be lots of mini tasks which will help focus in on key areas and develop fluency and accuracy in the use of their language. Are you keeping up with me there, Shirley? Sorry, I forgot to tell you to change slides and things.
Shirley?
Okay, so before then I develop those actual resources, what I'd want to be thinking about is trying to keep it as inclusive and accessible as possible. So I'll be looking about how I'm going to present my ideas. So I've taken the idea of making a booklet, very much like what Shirley was discussing, and also using a Padlet at the same time. So the students could use the booklets to produce drafts maybe of scaffolded, by using scaffolded activities, and then have to post that final copy on the Padlet. That would maybe perhaps give them a sense of purpose and maybe make them concentrate and make it a little bit more neat, because they know they're not the only people that are going to see it. For the whole class activities, I would use a range of methods again, try to make it engaging and inclusive. So maybe a combination of the darts exercises and funcs questioning and some speaking and listening activities as well. So I'll be aiming to complete one of these main tasks over either 1 or 2 sessions, depending on how long they are, really. Shirley, the next slide, can we miss out? Because I think I'm going to go on forever if I don't. So I had originally sort of like made up 2 example tasks, but I think I'm going to miss the first one out because it was very similar to something that Shirley was saying anyway. So let's go on to this task 2. So this task 2, this example, the main point, the main task would be getting them to write a formal letter to the activity centre, obviously inquiring about availability, discounts, etc. But before they could attempt that, we would have to really do a lot of mini tasks. So in the first session, I would be looking to try to get them to look at the structure of the text perhaps first. So I would maybe assess their prior knowledge using those funcs questions, maybe then get the students to arrange parts of a letter to make a whole. Maybe they could do that in pairs or as group work. After that, I would get them to be looking closely at language. So is the language, sorry, I've lost my train of thought. So formal language. So I've stolen your idea there, actually, Sunil. So I could give them a text and they could yeah, thank you for that. So they could underline the formal words and explain why. But then I thought they could take it further and maybe actually use those words in a little role play of the letter. So one of them would be pretending to be the receptionist, the other would be making the inquiry, and they could swap over and stuff. So that would really feed into those speaking and listening skills. After that, I'd even be tempted to have a quick class discussion on how using formal language will be important to their future careers. Because if they're public services, maybe they're looking to go into the police force, army, things like that. Yeah, uniform. Also, I'd want to look at phonics and discourse markers. So I'm going to have to look at how much I can fit into one lesson. I wouldn't want to overdo it and give them overload. So I might take number 3 and put it into the next session. I'll just see how it goes with those learners. So for home, let's just imagine then I've done all those tasks. For homework then, I'd get them to take that booklet with them with like a scaffolded letter, and I'd get them to do their draft with the aim of them bringing it back the next session. When they bring it back, the first thing that we would do is begin to give peer feedback, student feedback on those drafts. And I really love that idea of that pyramid. So I thought that was a really accessible way for peer feedback to happen, because it would just be like pointing out maybe where they are currently and where they need to aim for. So I thought that was really quite cool. Obviously then hopefully they'll be at a more confident position to then go and produce their final copy of the letter and then post it onto the Padlet. So that's just one example. Like Shirley said, you can really go to town, can't you? You could go on and do a really lovely whole half term. And I really love how reciprocal it is. So they all feed into each other. You're not ever just learning how to read or write. It's all feeding in together and helping develop that fluency. I think at the end of the unit, I would be tempted to maybe give the students a checklist of the key skills that they need for the exam, and together we could all check off the ones that we'd already covered just in this half term, because I think that would be like a huge confidence booster to realise how much they'd actually covered already. So that's it. I hope I haven't bored you all to death.
Very good. Well done. Wonderful. Lovely. We've got some fantastic comments again. Liz, lovely. I think you're a very, very clear learning path for students. I love the process product type approach, mastery approach. I think it's very strengthening and also consolidating. And yes, can we please start using Padlets for teaching English, please, if you're not using it? So thanks for mentioning that, Liz, because I'm a big fan of using it with students as well, because with Padlet, because when you join Padlet, you have a choice of different templates you can use. And there's one which can then develop into like a spidergram or a sociogram, whatever you call it. And you can put your task in the middle, and then you then ask the learners to go away from the class. And then each person has their own post. They can type whatever they want in their contribution. They can audio record something in. They can audio record something through a speech-to-text app and then put the text representation of what they said and upload it into the Padlet. They can even make a video recording of what's on their mind in terms of what their contribution could be. So everybody can then, you can capture everyone's contribution electronically. The next session, you got everything, and you got flipped learning as well. So that is a wonderful way of using it as well. Brilliant stuff. Thank you very much. So moving on then to the next group. So I'm just looking at my list. Who is up next? Is it?
Hi, Sunil. Yeah,
Dorette
and Vivian.
All right then. Thank you guys. Thanks for waiting so patiently. So whenever you guys are ready.
Hey guys.
We're all here. We're all supporting.
Okay.
Yeah, great stuff, Shirley. I agree. Oh right. Oh, that's a good idea, Shirley.
I can't find my.
Okay. Have you got the?
I can't find my PowerPoint. Let me just.
No worries, Dorette. Just take your time. Just make sure when you find it, you open it up fully and then go into Zoom screen share, and you should be able to locate it.
Okay. Now the Zoom. Oh dear me. I thought I would have had enough examples from this morning.
Sorry?
I thought I would have had enough examples of this morning of how to use it.
Oh, okay.
Right, hold on. Can you see anything?
No. Have you opened up the document fully on your PC?
It is open.
Okay. Have you clicked screen share?
Yes, I have.
Okay. Have you then clicked the actual mini version of your PowerPoint in the screen share screen?
One second.
If you click that, and then you have to click the button share on the right-hand corner, bottom right-hand corner.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. That's it.
Can you see anything?
That's it.
Yes.
Yeah. Well done, guys.
Okay, fine. So, right, for those of you who don't really know me, I am referred to as Grace because that's my preferred name. When I was born, that was the name given to me before I was christened direct. Okay. So I do prefer Grace. So in instances, some people may refer to me as Grace, but yes, for this purpose, my official name is Direct. Okay?
Okay, thank you.
So I worked with Zubia to look at speaking and listening. And having seen the other presentations, I'm now sort of thinking that I may have gone about it the wrong way. However, this is my version of speaking and listening from the perspective of the students that I work with.
Yes, okay.
So as human beings, we are dependent on interaction with others. Human interaction is a key part of our development and survival as humans. We need to be able to speak to others whilst they listen to us in order to carry out a task, and where we may not be speaking with our voices, we use actions or gestures to let others know who are watching what we are trying to say, even when not fully understanding the language, for example, foreign language. Speaking is the use of words used to convey different messages, to ask for something, to demand something, or to explain about something. To ask, demand, or to explain without words, but with the use of actions instead is called non-verbal. To convey meanings or explanations from one person to another using either verbal or non-verbal means is called communication. Right, moving on to the next slide. Right, I don't know if any of you is just looking at a couple of scenarios of when these are used, so verbal and non-verbal. So I don't know if any of you are familiar with Jeannie, the feral child in America. I've got the website there. I was going to go into the document more fully, but I think we're running out of time. So I'll just leave the website that this information can be found. So with Jeannie, for example, language is one of the main bases of human interaction, and without it, we cannot survive within society. We all are dependent on communication of one form or another to be able to function with normality in the society that we're in. And also with, say, a lollipop person, he or she doesn't speak, and the role is totally reliant on non-verbal communication, but yet the message that she's trying to explain is quite evident to whomever is watching. So for example, she puts her hand up, he or she puts her hand up, the car has to stop. So it's a sort of common view that everyone could understand. Are you following me so far, everyone?
Yes,
Grace.
Okay. However, how effectively we are able to communicate is dependent on our level of speaking and listening skills. Our speaking and listening skills can also be impacted by the amount of time that we are required to concentrate without a break. Our normal concentration span is said to be about 10 to 20 minutes. And common estimates of the attention span of healthy teenagers and adults range from 10 to 20 minutes. However, there is no empirical evidence for this estimate. And again, the website is there if people want to research it further. So here now I'm going to look at different forms of communication, or different means that in which we as humans communicate. So language is very important in whether it's verbal or non-verbal or sign language. We can communicate through dance, through music, through art, written communication, of course, and then looking at sort of creative communication idioms. And here we have understand how language is used. So creative idioms could be a blessing in disguise. And this website looks at those in more detail. I did have a video to play, however, I won't in this instance, but you can all access it through that website there. The best of both worlds. If we say these things during a speaking and listening session, or when we're teaching our students, will they understand the meaning behind it? Do they understand why we would say it? Yeah. Give someone the benefit of the doubt. Often we use these terms so loosely, and our students are perplexed by it all, because it could be that they've never heard these sayings before. Why are we using it in a speaking and listening lesson if we're not prepared to explain it fully? Or if we're using it, are we using it in the right context? Do students understand what we mean? Are they from a culture which uses these type of languages? So I think what I'm trying to say is, for our students, we need to be extremely careful when we use idioms to explain something. We've got to have a clear explanation so that they can follow. Right. For speaking and listening at entry level 1 through to entry level 2, the speaking and listening contents are providing information whereby learners need to, learners need to understand and use keywords, phrases related to position, situations such as in, on, under, etc. in a precise way. Now, again, we've got to be very careful when we're teaching these. What I realize, I haven't sort of given examples of these as I've seen others done with their presentation, but I think the information is sort of clear enough for people to follow. Again, they've got to explain in basic way how our body language can affect the meaning of what we say in everyday situations. They've got to obtain information. So the content is identify key detail from conversations in different contexts. Now, if we have learners who haven't got the developmental skills for speaking and listening, if their speaking and listening skills haven't been developed sufficiently, then I think this is where we will struggle to teach it effectively, so that students do understand the importance of speaking and listening. How important is this speaking and listening element within the structure of the exam? So, because I think for me, to a large extent, when I'm teaching speaking and listening, and I have learned over these past 5 days of this training that it is extremely important, and perhaps not to be left to, or just to take it as, well, they do speaking and listening every day. But we've got to be mindful that although they do speaking and listening every day, it doesn't come very naturally to do it in a formal setting where they're being assessed for speaking and listening. So I think it's important, and for my own sort of development, it's something that I'm going to be looking at more precisely when I go back to teaching in this aspect. Right, just moving on. Right, taking part in discussion. They've got to provide feedback and confirmation to others in discussions, disagree or challenge other people's ideas in a positive and non-aggressive way, work to and complete a given brief in a small group on unfamiliar, more complex topic or in an unfamiliar context. And finally, presenting information. So they've got to adjust their voice to change pitch, tone and speed for various effects, present ideas or an explanation to an unfamiliar audience, and use appropriate sequence words to present something in a logical way, and to present information to others. Now, if these skills haven't been taught effectively, then I would imagine that our students it would be very difficult for them to understand, and there lays the stumbling block to a lot of the successes that we may get from teaching, speaking and listening if it's not taught effectively. And for levels 1 and 2 is to obtain information, and they take part in 2 discussions, one formal, one informal, and then they've got to do a presentation. Again, if speaking and listening hasn't been taught properly or effectively, again, students are going to struggle at these levels. And finally, some things are culturally based, and in different cultures, there will be different idioms. And that endeth my presentation.
Thank you very much indeed. That's great. Thank you so much, Grace, for that information. It was very, very informative, very, very clear. Lots of very, very important implications for communication. And I think one of the things that you might want to consider, Grace, is based on the course and based on some of the presentations that we've actually heard, you might just want to try to build on that excellent content, to build on it and start thinking of techniques and specific strategies on how you're going to be able to get the language, so the language itself, more usable by the students. So from informal to formal, from them using dialect to maybe more standard English. How as a practitioner you're going to be able to take your students on that journey, which will then obviously help them with their outputs, with their speaking tasks, and also their functional skills writing as well. So it's some brilliant information, very, very clear. All I would do is start thinking now about the techniques and what resources you need, whether it's paper-based, card-based, or digital, that you would use, and whether you would have them, whether you would do things in terms of as a teacher more directly in the class as demonstration, or would you be asking students to work in small groups or pairs? How would you go about getting role plays organized and then trying to get learners to be able to express themselves and take part in tasks? So, but there's lots of fantastic information though that you presented, but now it's about the next step is just to think about the technique as a practitioner.
Yeah, thank you. For me, I think it's not that I took it for granted, but I think I placed more emphasis on the writing and reading elements within the functional skills English, and use this or treated the speaking and listening as an add-on rather than as part of the whole package.
Yes, yeah.
And I think this is where I'm sort of learning that it is as important as the other 2 elements.
Absolutely. And the speaking and the writing, I mean, I think one colleague talked about the, you know, keeping it reciprocal, so one benefits the other. And you know, writing is a productive language skill, and so speaking. So I always use them interchangeably. And so, and again, you know, with writing requires language, the correct use of language and the appropriate use of language. Similarly with speaking as well, and how you can get students to be aware of the use of the tone, using register, using the appropriate vocabulary. How as a language teacher you be able to get them to that space where they're going to be, you know, getting really good results in their functional skills, good marks, good feedback from teachers, and also we're also unwittingly improving their employability by making them much more sharper in their key communication skills. So they come across well. But there's some really good insights there, Grace. Thanks for sharing. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Zabia?
Hi.
Hi.
Hello there. I'm feeling really nervous now all of a sudden.
No, don't worry. Honestly, it's all fine. It's all supportive. It's all supportive. All
And
right.
I did very well with mine, I think.
Well done, Grace. You did really well. So I'm leading on from what Grace has started with, about speaking and listening. Can everyone see that screen?
Yeah. Oh,
yeah,
nice.
you did it. Okay.
Great.
And that's the little thing that Joe clicked, isn't it, earlier?
Yeah, you can go straight into slide share with that icon. You should be able to. That's it.
Great stuff. Okay. So just as an introduction, I'm Zubia. I work within the SLDD department at the Baseford campus, and I teach students at Entry 3 and Level 1 mainly. Okay. Now, our students don't always have a vocation in mind, and therefore the programme that they're on is mainly focused on life skills and employability skills. And they have an hour and a half of maths and an hour and a half of English per week. And unfortunately, that's all I get to teach of maths and English in the week as well. I wish it was more, but that's all I teach. It's the same group of students that stay together all week. So I wanted to use this presentation to bring parts of what we've covered in the last couple of weeks, just to show how I'd like to use everything we've learned in the future classes for my students. So I wanted to focus on the importance of using formal and informal spoken language. So I've just kind of pinpointed that within the speaking and listening area. So when we get students, I always think it's really important to speak to them about why speaking formally is so important. It's a question that they ask me a lot. Why do we need to speak like that? We're fine, everybody can understand us. Why do we need to learn a new way of speaking to people? And I think they just feel like there won't ever, just because they've never had to in the past, that there won't ever be a need for them to speak formally. So I think getting that over and done with at the beginning is really important, just so that they understand, linking on to the next bullet point, that actually formal speech is not the same as the Queen's English. I think they assume that that's how we're trying to get them to speak, and it isn't. And none of us, well, I don't speak like that anyway. And so I don't think they always understand that, and they always think that they don't want to be posh, they don't want to be associated with being posh, so to speak. They're sort of against that whole formal speech from the start, but it's just about slowly reminding them at points at which they may need to speak in a more formal manner. So there's a definition of, if I can see it, I just need to get rid of this chat thing. So there's a definition of formal language in the Cambridge Dictionary that I quite liked, which was, we use formal language in situations that are serious or that involve people we don't know well. And informal language is more commonly used in situations that are more relaxed and involve people we know well. Okay. You've probably seen me wiggling that around now, that's okay. So I quite liked that, because I just thought that it was a really nice way of putting it across to the students. It's not wishy-washy, and it's not got any overly formal language in that that they won't understand. So I quite like that definition. I watched the whole Carol duet thing on the TED Talks, and I thought that was really, really good. And I liked the whole growth mindset, sort of, the feeling that it sort of gives. I just liked that clip, and I thought that that model a nice way to explain how it's important to have self-belief, because often they think that they won't ever be able to speak in a formal manner. And that model was just nice. It was just a nice way to kind of explain that actually you can all do it. It's not about waking up tomorrow morning and being able to do it straight away. Speak in a more formal manner, but slowly you'll understand the importance of using formal language in particular settings. I think checking prior knowledge with them is really important, because some may have some knowledge of speaking formally, they may have used it previously. So I think it's really good to have a conversation with them about how it makes them feel, what situations they may have used formal language in the past. And then go through maybe a list of things on the board, or just as a chat, just to say when it's appropriate to use formal language. There's a nice clip I saw on BBC Bite Size. I won't play it now, I was going to, but it's just a lady at the doctor's, so it's a situation that they're all familiar with. Just a short sort of 50-second clip, and all it is her showing the difference between using formal language with either a nurse, doctor, or somebody who works at the doctor's surgery, compared to using like a phone call she gets from a friend while she's sitting at the doctor's surgery. So that's quite nice, just to show them quickly the difference, that you can switch between one and the other quite easily. So yeah, so a listing activity to show how they'd use each. And then I thought it was really important to speak to them about whether there's something in between informal and formal, because they're not just two complete, there's not just like a very thin line between the two. There's so many different areas between the two. So I thought that would be quite good. So I saw a good card activity on the TES website, and I quite like that. That was where they had, I think there was 14 cards, and you place them going from completely informal and then all the bits in between going to formal, and I really liked that. So it might have had things on there like you're called up to stage because you've been given an award for something, and then at the other side it may have had you're sitting on the sofa with your family watching a movie. So you just place those, and it's just about knowing that actually it's not just one or the other. There are lots of bits in between, different levels of being formal. And then there's just other worksheets, I think, just to show that the comparisons between the two. I think we spoke about these in one of the sessions, where we said that we could give them a list of informal words, and could they change them to be formal words, and then give them a list of formal words, and could they do vice versa. So that's a nice little activity for them to do. Some things that I've done in the past is to do some work in role play work. So my students are doing a module on customer service skills. So we chose lots of different sort of role play activities. Some were in a at a hairdresser, some were in a clothing store. So various sort of different ideas for that, and they worked in pairs. And myself and the support tutor did the first one, just so that they weren't so nervous about it when they had to start. And we got them to start with the informal way of doing it, and that made them all laugh, and it just sort of relaxed them all a little bit before going on to the formal way of doing that. So that was really nice. So they just came up, and they were quite happy to come up to the front actually and do that, perform it to each other in the class. That was really nice. I think because we'd got the informal ways out of the way, and everyone was sort of laughing and saying, oh no, that's not how you speak to each other. So that was a good idea. The British Council website, which we've mentioned in the week as well, that's got some really nice ideas as well, where you can listen to a conversation between two people and watch that conversation happening. And then the next step is where they remove the voice of one of the people, whether it's the customer. So you would be that other person, you would step in, and they sort of give you speech bubbles on the screen, and you just you read the speech bubble to respond. That's more for ESOL sort of learners or learning the language, but can easily be adapted and used for our students as well. I think it'd be really good for them. The other thing, so yeah, going in, talking about ESOL and things, for those for who English is a new language, it might be quite surprising for some people who speak another language that our formal speech isn't actually as formal as their first language. So I can speak about Urdu and Punjabi because I know those languages. I don't know any other languages, but I'm sure there probably are some. Where even when you just say you to someone, it's said in a different way, in a polite manner, and then in a different way when you're being when you're not so polite. So you're talking to someone younger than you or somebody that you wouldn't necessarily be formal with. So for them to know that we only use the word you, whether it's someone's older, younger, formal, non-formal, might be quite surprising to them. The other thing I was thinking about was formal and informal body language. So again, just because you're not actually speaking, body language is still a form of communication, and there are different ways of being formal and informal with that. So it might be that you're slouching when you're being informal, but at an interview you sit up straight. So it's about trying to show the students that that also matters. There is a difference in being formal and informal there as well. And then I was looking at the use of emojis, which obviously goes more into sort of technology and written language, but just how they also show a type of body language, and it's being used more and more all the time. So yeah, that was that one. Quick little mention of alive. So to ensure, I'm just going to try and, I don't want to stop the share, but I just don't want to, I want to come out of the big screen show. I don't know how to do that. Is there an F button I can click to get it off?
Press escape. Press escape.
Ah, there you go. Yeah. Right, okay, thank you.
Shirley.
Great stuff. Yeah, so I liked the alive thing. So ensure lessons are accessible by using a variety of methods to teach. Move it out the way, teach the topic, which help to link the topic to a particular vocation where possible, where students are not studying on a vocational programme, to use interests and hobbies to support the learning. I think role plays activities in pairs or small groups to attempt the use of formal language in a comfortable environment. Include all learners, ensuring that roles are swapped during reading out and role play activities, and then to change the activities regularly, just to keep them engaged and focused on what they're doing. So that's a good way of doing it. And then just as a summary, Grace, I don't know if you want to just come back and mention summarise your 2 points at the top, or if you just want me to carry on.
I'm happy for you to carry on, Zubia.
Okay.
It lines up very well with what we said.
Yeah, no, that's fine. So just to tie up what Grace had said at the start, just about the importance of spoken language, how important it is for us, and then also culturally based, and in different cultures there'll be different idioms and understandings of things. And then for me, I just wanted to end it by saying it's all about keeping the balance, so making sure that we tell students we're not trying to take their language away from them altogether, that's not what we're saying, but just that they need to know that there are times when formal language does need to be used. And that's it.
Well done, excellent.
Yeah.
Well done, Zubia.
Oh, thank you.
Very good, excellent, very, very good. Well done.
Oh,
brilliant feedback from the group. I loved how you really taken a practitioner-based approach, and you looked at all different aspects of speaking and listening, and really showed great depth of understanding between informal and formal and how you can go about teaching it. And I think this will really help our students to kind of step into paradigm. So from how they use speaking in their own world to how they could write in a more formal setting. And I think those activities are going to really help. And I'm so glad you've reinforced the British Council, the work done by British Council in speaking and listening. Obviously, it's a design for training people in speaking and listening communication skills as a second language, but you will find, as Zubia said, there are lots of activities that can be transferred. I mean, I never thought about this, Zubia, but that bubble act, that sort of conversation bubble activity, where it's a gap fill, it's a information gap activity. and then asking the students to be able to fill the gaps. And then whether they make an assessment, whether they use formal or informal, based on their understanding of the content. That's a brilliant activity. That can definitely be used in functional skills to train students in being aware of informality and formality in speech, and what choices they have to make if they're going to be doing a presentation, or if they're going to be doing maybe, you know, a discussion and things of that nature. So really good. Can I mention, guys, about growth mindset? Did I insert a GCSE maths case study on how a GCSE maths teacher applied the principles of growth mindset in their prompting and questioning to help a disengaged student? Did I put that in the Padlet?
I think so. I'm not sure.
Okay, all right, because there are some examples there who really want to be able to fully implement what Carol Dweck is saying. What I've done is I've developed a case study. Well, it's basically a dialogue between a GCSE maths teacher and a disengaged maths student. But through the questioning and the prompting, I'm applying Carol Dweck's growth mindset principles. So I'll double check, even though it's not English language based, but still, as you will appreciate, the main thing is about applying the growth mindset principles, and you could adapt them in terms of your planning of conversations with students as well. So that's really good. Thank you, Zabia. Amazing.
Thank you.
Fair play to you. And well done, Grace. Thank you. Brilliant team. Okay, right. So moving on then, is it now Tariq and Matthew?
Yes, I think so. I'm just going to screen share now.
That's fine. Thank you.
Okay, can everybody see that?
Yeah, great. Thank you, Matthew.
Great. Okay, so we're going to be looking at growth mindset with a specific focus on entry-level skills, speaking, listening, reading, and writing. I think Tariq has phoned in. So are you there, Tariq? Can you hear me? Perhaps not. Well, I'll cover for him. Oh, you are?
Yeah, I'm here.
Great. Okay, so
yeah.
We're looking at growth mindset, and we've sort of put together a lesson plan that deals with a sort of metacognition approach, whereby we're going to sort of delve into what growth mindset means to the learners themselves. And this short activity looks at developing their speaking, listening skills through discussions, feedback, summarizing, their reading skills via looking up definitions in the dictionary and so forth, and their writing skills as well. So Tariq, do you want me to go through these slides with these pictures, and do you want to just quickly talk about the thinking behind this?
Okay, hang on. I'm just coming back in. I just dropped out. So which slide are we on now?
Oh, yeah. Sorry, I forgot you're on the phone, aren't you? So both of us have technical difficulties.
Yeah, so I just dropped out. I missed what.
That's okay. Tariq, do you have the slides in front of you? Do you have your slides in front of you? So if you tell Matthew which slide you want.
I just have to warn everybody that my connection drops out every few minutes, so that's why it's a bit disjointed. Okay, so obviously we want to embed these kind of ideas into the learners rather than just telling them about, to sort of explore it a bit. So something that I do just to try and get the learners thinking metaphorically and matching things to the actual English learning is saying, well, oh God.
Okay. You know whether Matthew, is Tariq using standard mobile, or is he going through broadband, you know, through the talking? Do you know?
I'm not sure. It's okay, Tarek. I'll pick it up.
Yeah, I'm using.
Okay.
Don't worry.
Yeah, I'm back again.
I'll pick it up. I'll pick it up. Don't worry.
Okay. All right, Matthew. All right. Okay.
Okay, because I think my connection's back now. So essentially, let's get the right slide. Okay, so we would start off by perhaps a little starter activity at the beginning of a lesson. You know, just getting the learners into this idea of what we mean by growth mindset. So if you wanted to run a marathon, or climb a mountain, or obtain a black belt, or indeed save the universe, all of these things are going to be quite complicated and difficult. And we are going to have to tune the learners into this step-by-step approach. They are going to meet obstacles and challenges along the way. So we'd ask them a question. If you wanted to achieve any of these things...
Can I jump in?
Go on, jump in.
Yeah, so obviously I'd say if you wanted to run a marathon, would you just go and do it next week? Or if you wanted to go into a boxing match or climb a mountain, would you just go right ahead and do it? So obviously they'd say no. Then say, okay, how would you go about it? What would you do?
Yeah, and then we pick it up with what would you expect to do? How would you go about it? So this opens up a sort of you know, a sort of informal discussion, doesn't it? So we can break down the steps that you would need to become successful at actually climbing that mountain or obtaining you know, winning a gold in a marathon. So hopefully that sort of activates the schemata, and we can relate that to functional skills English as well. So we'd start off by eliciting the experience and opinions from the learners about their learning inside and outside of the classroom. And then the first thing we do is get them to have a look at the key words. What do we mean by mindset? What do we mean by fixed? What do we mean by growth? We can get them to look up the definitions or synonyms. This could be a paired activity or a individual activity. Anything you want to add in there, Tarek?
Yep. Yes, certainly. I think the way my idea is what Sunil has said is how to get them to internalize the concepts. So if they go out and say, okay, what's a mindset? And they think, well, it's an attitude, it's a way of thinking, and they find out for themselves what the meaning is. And obviously fixed, they'll find out it means something that's stuck or not moving. Growth, that something's getting bigger and stronger. So they could do it like you could give mindset to one group, fixed to another, and they write down the synonyms and they're different, and what it means to them as well, I think is important. Sometimes the dictionary definitions aren't clear or they're too complicated. So say, okay, what do you think it means? And then we try and find an easier way of talking about those concepts. So they know what the concepts mean at the very beginning. Yeah. Over to you, Matt.
Thank you. So yeah, then building on top of that, ask the learners, what do you think a fixed mindset is? What do you think it is to have a growth mindset? And then we can think about different types of people within the media, within the public eye that have these types of mindsets. Perhaps can you think of some examples related to their own learning? Then do they identify as having a fixed mindset or a growth mindset themselves? And then again, a list of definitions and synonyms that the learners can.
Oh, can I jump in, Matt?
Please do, Tarek. Jump away.
So the other thing, taking on board what Sunil said before, is perhaps before the lesson we put some posters up, anagrams, letter tiles of some of these key words around the classroom. And some of those, I think you've got some posters as well.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I've got those resources I'm going to show at the end. Yeah. So this is a good diagram activity. So talking about posters and resources, yeah, we can provide learners with this diagram of the fixed versus growth mindset. We ideally blank out the text and the explanations there and instruct the learners to fill in their predictions of how. Go on, Tarek.
Yeah, I'm back again. So yeah, my idea, obviously it's in a visual form, and we give it to learners, and then they start to try and, once they've figured out what all these words mean, then they try and see how each type of person would approach each step. And they fill in or jot down notes, you know, either in groups or individuals. Maybe you give one the growth mindset and one the fixed mindset, one group. And then they start to think about how that kind of person would approach those tasks. Yeah. Over to you, Matt.
Thank you. Back to the studio.
So they're using prediction.
Yeah. So we're trying to incorporate speaking and listening into all of this, as we were discussing earlier on.
Note taking. Yeah. Okay, I think we can move on to the next one.
Okay. So we've got a written task there as well. We can instruct the learners to write a summary of 50 to 100 words of what the growth mindset means to them.
Okay, I'm just coming back in.
Okay.
Oh, we've gone right to the end. I missed something. Hang on.
You're having audio trouble.
Can we go back a step?
I'm having PowerPoint trouble. Don't worry. Here we go.
Very well, gentlemen. It's great.
Okay. Can you go back? Because I just dropped out a second there.
Okay, this one?
Before we get to that.
This one?
Before the written task. Well, it's probably behind. Yeah. So before that, I just wanted to say, obviously, they would discuss, once they filled in those diagrams, they would just discuss it with other group, and they start to, you know, share ideas, and perhaps they could say, no, I think it would be that or this. They really start to think about it. So yeah, I think, have you covered this part, Matt? How the diagram, compare with the diagram?
Who knows? I think so.
Yeah. Yeah, obviously, again, they get the diagram, and they find out the actual steps that it's on the diagram. And of course, some of them will be similar, so they might start to get more confidence that, you know, that they can sort of figure out things for themselves. So then it's embedding those kind of behaviors into them. Yeah. And obviously the final kind of sort of plenary activity, I think Matt had moved on to.
Was the written task, right?
Was the summary. So we're kind of using, yeah. So that's something I used to do with the FL at the end of a lesson, write 50 to 100 words. It's a very small number of words, so they don't get intimidated. They think, oh, I can write 50 words because that's only a few sentences. Obviously, once they get into it, they might write more than that, or, you know, they might, you know. So it's kind of encouraging their fluency, even though it doesn't seem like that. And then you can do the Feynman technique, but they've got the notes from the summary, and they all sort of discuss it with a partner or another person. This is what I've put. Do you agree? What did you put? So they're kind of teaching each other what the growth mindset behavior means. And the other thing I wanted to say, I don't know if we put that, is perhaps we could say, well, how would you use it, or make it more paired into their own life? So how are you going to use these techniques in your life? So then they can, like Sunil was saying, they can use the sort of first person. Well, I will do this, I can do this, just to embed it more, make them sort of internalize it. So that's kind of the summary of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And then we've got some, I'll just try and share some other resources that I've found that will be useful to use as a plenary as well. So I'll just try and show you these. Okay, so yeah, these are good sort of either starter activities or plenary activities, sort of growth mindset questions that you can ask at the end of a lesson. What made you think hard today? How will you challenge yourself today? What strategy can you try, etc., etc. got a nice sort of, oh, hang on, that's not the right one, sorry. Yeah, got a nice sort of sorting exercise here as well, that you can sort into 2 columns, the fixed mindset column or the growth mindset column. I think these are really useful just as starter exercise as well. So I'll try and share these on the Padlet as well. Okay, I think that about wraps it up. Tarek, anything else you want to add?
No, I think, yeah, that's it. Great.
Good. Okay, so I think we battled those technical difficulties well.
Well done, gentlemen. Well done. Excellent. Really good content. And yes, thank you so much for dealing with these challenges. It must be a national broadband thing, because I'm experiencing it too. It sometimes comes, sometimes I lose connection, sometimes I'm okay. But well done there. Brilliant.
With Google, I think Google might be down or something actually.
And yeah, and the additional challenge is that you've adopted a team teaching with the difficulties. That's another thing. So well done for for carrying on with that. I think it's a brilliant topic. It is a fascinating topic, and I think that we probably just need to I'm just thinking of the functional skills learners, the functional skills English learners at different levels, as to how we go about using this as either as a theme or approach in our teaching. And so if we are teaching it as a conceptual thing, then to what extent is that conceptual understanding of growth mindset going to lead into a functional skills activity? I think Shirley gave an excellent example in the chat. What Shirley said was, you could develop this to get learners to write a letter on how young people, for young people on how to help them to meet a challenge, because that requires the application of all the conceptual stuff that you've talked about. So something like that, where the end outcome is funneling towards a functional skills task, which applies the concepts, as well as the actual understand the conceptual side of things. I think that would be fantastic. And also for me personally as a practitioner, it's about having, for me now with growth mindset, having a principled approach to teaching my students, whereby in my questioning and my use of prompts in terms of growth mindset, in terms of how I can get them to embrace more challenges, see effort as a path to mastery, they see constructive criticism as developmental, and they learn lessons from others. So if we can start to think of those sorts of things and how they can find themselves into some of the functional skills activities, whether they're reading about it, whether they're skimming and scanning about it, whether they're inputting it in their presentations, or they're questioning, or how they are planning their writing. This is where the real power of growth mindset can come into place. And whether you also wanted to maybe, because I thought the beginning, those questions at the beginning were really good. How would you immediately get them to start using their subconscious mind, which is the growth area, which is the area of creativity, and also productivity as well. So those questions in the starter would be what you said there is a brilliant pre-task activity where you, as you said, you're engaging their schemata. So anything with how would you or what if, something similar to what Ross mentioned, these are really good starter questions. I like those end questions at the end, at the end of I think if you can upload them onto the day 5 column, that would be amazing. If you could do that, Matthew, that'd be amazing.
Yeah, no problem. I'll do that.
Thank you very much. Thanks, gentlemen. Well done. Brilliant stuff. It's amazing how each presentation is covering something different. So it's kind of adding to our insight and knowledge about English language teaching. It's amazing. Well done. Thank you, guys. Last but not least, Siobhan.
Hello.
Hi there, Siobhan. Thanks for waiting so patiently.
No, you're fine. I was just listening to what Tarek and Matt presented, and I found it really interesting. I found all the presentations very interesting, and yeah, like you were saying, it's I didn't expect every single presentation to be so different, so it's been a big learning curve, to be honest.
Brilliant. It's my favorite part when I haven't got to do anything. Sorry, jokes aside.
Right, let's see. Let's do my best with this now.
No, but we are getting some brilliant presentations. Really good.
Oh, hold on. One sec. I've got a number of different screens here. Sorry. Has that screen shared?
Yes, it has. Yes.
Okay, 1 second now. See if, how do I get this? Oh yeah. Okay. So is that full screen?
Yeah, that's fine. That's okay. You can. Well, we can see the main screen.
That's okay. As you can
Yeah,
see
that's
it.
fine. That's okay. Yeah, that's fine.
So first off, I just want to say, yeah, thank you to all of you. I really enjoyed listening. Secondly, I want to apologise about how basic this is in appearance, because I've been working off my mobile, so I haven't no internet and stuff. So it's just been difficult. Like what other people are saying, it hasn't been the easiest. So I've been thinking about this for the last week, in particular, and I've already said to you, Sunil, I'm involved in different things, so I wanted to try and double up on other projects that I'm involved in. And something that my head of faculty asked me to look into was the issues surrounding Interact when we were using it in lockdown. So lockdown in particular gave me an opportunity to look at how we do approach learning. I know we were remotely learning and we were using Teams meetings and Zooms and all the rest of it. But one of the platforms that we were asked to use by the college, Nottingham College, was Interact. And I've really had a thought about this over the last few weeks. I think it's a really great platform. I think Rich Buckley in particular, one of the creators involved in it, has done an excellent job. I know there was other people involved, but it's Rich that I deal with. He's done a great job. However, despite that, there were problems continuously with how our learners, in particular functional skills learners, interacted with Interact. So I wanted to look at that because I have to do it anyway because I have to feed back to my HOF, but at the same time I thought it was something quite interesting. What were the barriers to making Interact a success? Now, that's not to say that it wasn't a success. For a lot of my learners, in particular my GCSE learners, it did work. But I just think for my functional skills learners, just the whole process of using it wasn't enjoyable, and I had many emails and many phone calls, saying that they were finding it difficult and they were upset, and that as a teacher made me feel, sad really for the learners, that that's the experience that they were having. All right, so what I'm looking at is using Nottingham College technology to extend learning. So in a sense, I'm just looking at Interact, okay? And I'm only going to briefly touch on Interact because it does actually bring in something else I'm interested in, and that's how I've gone about bringing Interact into my classroom. So again, what you're going to be looking at. Right, so the benefits of using test students daily thinking, and it creates a more real learning environment, and one that builds skills which can be transferred to their main qual and the world of work. Now that's something that's come up quite a lot. How are we transferring skills to their main qualification and the world of work? The faculty I work in is in creative, and something that came out of Ofsted, we were Ofsted it in, I can't remember what month, was it January or February, I can't remember now, was how are we making them in an art room, or what's happening in the media studies classroom. Okay, so how are we making that link, and then how are we making that link to the world of work? Okay, and something that I noticed, and I'm sure all of you did as well, during lockdown, was that I felt anyway that I wasn't making those links, and I felt that Interact, as much and all as I enjoyed using it, I felt was creating a little bit of a barrier as well. And there's a number of reasons that I believe that happened. Okay, right, so I'll go to the next one. Right, so students are using mobiles. We know this, even if you are not. So why not embrace it in a positive way? And I firmly believe this. I firmly believe that we should be using mobiles in the classroom. So we had lockdown, and all of a sudden everything went online. And I felt that that was kind of a shock to the system, not just for students, but also for staff. All of a sudden, we've gone from being in the classroom to being out of the classroom, and then every single thing that we're doing is online, and every way that we're interacting with students, with colleagues, is online. Okay. So the college does have, if used and managed in a controlled way, that students can be a tool that most of us use anyway. And students, most of our students, as soon as we stop talking in class, they've got the mobile out, or as soon as they go outside the door, the mobile is out. It's a difficulty sometimes getting them to put away the mobile. So why create that barrier? I personally believe let them use the mobiles in class, okay, and especially for interact. And then there's also a lot of resistance to classwork and homework. And instead of making it an odorous task, homework that can be taken online and completed on the students' mobiles might be easier and less of a chore. And we might have less pushback then from students if that's what we're actually trying to incorporate. So I decided personally to look at how to improve the use of the college platform Interact. And again, I've already spoken about lockdown. Okay, right. And then my half also asked me to look into it. Okay, so I was being a bit cheeky in one sense because, as I said, I am working on different things at the minute. So it was trying to bring everything together. Okay, so the barriers I found to using Interact, and some of you may have had the same issues, may or may not. So I found that there was an oversaturation of different apps being used by students and staff, and it caused massive amounts of confusion. I had students contacting me saying that they were using one app for art, one app for something else, one app for their math, and then one app for English, and it was causing so many problems. And again, that's reiterated, main qual using different apps, possibly the biggest barrier. And I did find that a barrier for myself, because having conversations with my colleagues in main qual, they were using different apps and then couldn't engage with what I was talking about. So that was a problem as well. And then too many steps to ask Interact. I don't know if any of you found this. And again, this is not me giving out about Interact. I'm just saying that what happened with some of my students. Some of my students found it fine, but some of them, in particular my functional skills students, really had difficulties accessing Interact, and there was lots of tears and things like that. Use of student email, most students don't use it. Okay. And then ease of use, again, there was too many steps for some of my students. Okay. So this was what I found from my learners, to barriers to using Interact. And then unfortunately what happened was a lot of them gave up, and then we didn't have any contact or any work being submitted for weeks and weeks, and it was a case of trying to contact the students and trying to get them back on track. And in a sense, even though this was lockdown and it's a bigger picture, in a sense this is reflected in our classrooms as well. If we lose the students, if something doesn't click for them, or if they can't engage with what we're doing, then we lose them. And it made me start to think about how I was actually teaching and neuro-linguistic programming. And even though I had done that in university when I trained as a teacher, let's go back a few years now, it made me start to question my own practice as to how I was teaching in the classroom. And instead of, excuse me, and instead of the why was that we had to give them work, we had to keep them working during lockdown. But I started thinking about how I was doing that, and had I set my students up properly. And again, that links to, do we actually set our students up properly in class when we're asking them to do tasks, when we're asking them to complete something, or do we drop them in cold turkey and expect them to just achieve? And I think, reflecting on my own practice and as a reflective practitioner, I believe that that's where my biggest failing was with lockdown, was that I just expected students, because they use mobile phones, because they have, they're meant to be a tech savvy generation, I just expected that they would be able to to use this and to be, you know, to be savvy on it, and they weren't, unfortunately. So my goal is that students buy into Interact and see the benefits. So I need to look at outcome focus. So I've decided to pare it back. When I'm going to be using Interact in the class, I've decided to pare back. So what do I actually want the students to achieve? And as teachers, we're always asking ourselves that, like, that should be one of the first questions that we raise in any class. What is it that I actually want these students to achieve by the end of the lesson? What goal have I got for them? And what goal have I got for myself? Do we meet anywhere in the middle? Have they achieved beyond my expectations? Have we underachieved? Do we need to go back and reflect again? Okay, so what do I want them to achieve? So I decided, you know, in future when I'm using Interact, I need to visualize what it is I want the learners to achieve. Then sensory, observing and responding to change. And I don't think I did that enough during lockdown. I think I should have changed the platform that I was using, or maybe try to integrate it more with a different platform. There's a number of problems associated with that, and one of the main problems was that we were told to use it, especially within our faculty. So it was difficult, and we are using it going forward next year. So this is going to inform what I do come September. But I think I'm going to use it with Google Classroom as well, not just Interact. Then behavioural flexibility. Did I give students a choice of options? And again, in class, I'm going to try and bring that into my teaching. And these are all things that I looked at when I trained as a teacher, going back a few years now. And somewhere along the way during lockdown, I just got so caught up with why we had to do something that I completely forgot about the how, and I left my learners behind by doing that. And then the report, you know, the first few weeks of lockdown, was I open enough to students for them to approach and say, we can't do this? And that is something I'm reflecting on at the minute as well. And then trust. Eventually we got to the point where students, you know, especially for my functional skills students, were saying, I'm really struggling with this and I need your help. And can we look at doing something else? And that's essentially what we had to do. For some students, not all students. But this can be used, and I'm going to try and go back into all my lessons again while I'm doing my own scheme of work, and while I'm looking at my lessons for September. I'm going to go back in and look at all of my lessons, and in particular any new lessons that I'm creating for functional skills. You know, what do I want my students to achieve? How am I going to get them there, the journey? And am I going to respond to change? Am I going to be flexible? And am I going to have that rapport so that students can actually discuss, you know, issues with me? Or can we meet in the middle somewhere? Okay, so what am I going to do differently? So just using Interact as an example, before lockdown, I did show students how to use Interact, but now I know that I need to spend more time managing it. And I need to have more of an outcome focus for students. Okay, it's not something that can be used independently. It has to be incorporated into what they're doing in class. So when I'm demonstrating in future, I am going to ask students to follow along on their mobiles. I'm going to say, get your mobile out, we'll do it together in class. So there's a visual and there's an actual, they're actually doing it while we're talking through it. And I've made a comment there. Me as a person, I know the type of learner I am. I'm very tactile. I need to be doing something. So I learn by doing. So I don't know why I thought my students would be any way different. You know, people have different ways of learning, but for some reason, you know, I just assumed that they would soak it in because they're tech savvy generation, and that really wasn't the case. And I let my students down by not being more tactile with them in regards to Interact. I need to integrate it into every lesson. If we're asked to use it as a faculty, which we are going forward, we've been asked to use Interact and Google Classrooms, I'm going to try and integrate it into every single lesson so that it doesn't just become something that is looked at before an exam, or it doesn't become something that's looked at before progress review. I'm going to try and bring it into every single lesson. So maybe as a starter, look at your Interact homework, get your phones out, we'll look at it as a starter, maybe review it in the plenaries, maybe use it for peer teaching, maybe have groups of students working together. So I'm going to try and be a little bit more flexible with that as well. And let me see. And then I am going to try and have more discussions with the main qualification tutors. This idea that we work separate, for me just doesn't work. And I know a lot of you have very close relationships with the main qual tutors. But I don't think we can work as separate entities really anymore. We have to really try and engage with the main qual tutors. So build that rapport as well. And then instead of having a load of different steps in order to do something, maybe try and cut all of that out, and maybe, you know, work with the students to come up with just a direct link, or maybe, you know, is there steps that we can bypass? Have students working together in order to access Interact or whatever learning tool they're using. Maybe ask willing students to demonstrate how they use it on their PC and mobile, so again, building rapport. And then for me personally, I know that I need to dedicate time to make it successful. So that's outcome based as well. So I know that I've spoken about Interact here, but you could use, for me personally, you could use this for any lesson. It's this idea of, you know, the programming of why we're doing something, how we're doing something, but what's more important is how we reach our end goal. And has it been inclusive for all students, or have I left someone behind? And I really do feel that during lockdown, when we were using Interact, I left a lot of students behind, and it's something that I wasn't very happy about. And if we are going to be remotely teaching in September, who knows? I'm hoping we won't be, but it's something that I definitely want to look at. I don't want to leave any student behind, and I really do feel I did leave some students behind. So a little bit different, but it's something that I'm working on at the minute. So I wanted to try and incorporate into what we're looking at in terms of presentations. So that's me done. I'm finished.
Thank you very much. Well done, Siobhan. Thank you for that. It was very informative. Some great information, some brilliant content. It's just highlighting how important electronic platforms are, and they do have a major role to play in supporting our work. I think some of the things that you might want to consider, Siobhan, is to kind of funnel it more to how some specific aspects of Interact or electronic devices or web-based programs in general can support the learning within the functional skills criteria. So how it can support letter writing, how it can support SPAG development, how it can actually improve their speaking and listening, how it can actually be supportive to questioning, etc. So all these things,
that would definitely be something that I want to into, and that's I mean, for me, this is just the beginning of something. I could see something like, you know, a good piece of research.
I can too. I can see lots of potential, and I think that this is a good foundation for you to then start kind of looking at this from an English language practitioner point of view, in the sense of which aspects of the platform can feed into a spelling activity for my level 1 students, how it can help them with implied meaning from pictures, how it can help them with annotation. So going more into the specifics and the technical aspects of English language teaching is where we need to draw. I mean, I've put some there's some examples in the chat, Siobhan, that you can look at, and I've also written some specific ideas and suggestions on how you can get this code switching, paradigm switching done as well, how it can then translate itself into the classroom to support language learning of the students. But it was a fantastic presentation, and it had lots of good stuff. And I'm also an NLP practitioner myself. So all this is wonderful rapport building, and then the VACOG, the visual, sensory, kinesthetic, it's all down my street. So it was really good to hear that. So thank you very much. And I'm sure there are going to be lots of other conversations that you'll have about the networking amongst colleagues in the department, and then how, because that's important as well. You know, for the practice to ensue in the classroom, you need that backup and networking beyond. And that was why lots of information was very helpful, very useful. Okay, guys, now all good and great things have to come to an end. Can I thank everybody for their hard work and effort and endurance, really, and with all the technology issues that we've had, and producing some excellent presentation. Really, really helpful, really useful and informative. How have you found the presentation bit? You all relieved? Happy? Found it useful? How are you all feeling? Excellent. Well done. Well done. And I've made a recording of the presentation. So if anybody doesn't want me to send a recording of their presentation, can you please specifically, could you email me, please? If you don't want your presentation to be recorded or sent for circulation, just send me an email. I'm not going to be sending any follow-up emails until tomorrow now. So any like recordings and anything else, I'm going to do it tomorrow. It's just that I've got some other webinars to do for other people now. So if we can just please, if you could email me any concerns or observations around the recordings, then I can then act appropriately when I email tomorrow, if that makes sense. Okay. But it's been amazing, really helpful. When I send you an email, I'll give you some finishing off guidance. There's about the learning diaries, and also there is an end of course evaluation that needs to be completed, and that then all of that, I mean the evaluation forms basically will need to go to Julie Chamberlain at the University of Warwick, and so you know, I'll provide Julie's email address and some guidance notes. And then also just a reminder, if some of you are thinking of doing the accreditation, what is going to happen thereafter. Okay, if some of you wanted to do the level 5 module, which is attached to this course, then I'll also be able to offer some information and guidance as well. So please look forward to my email tomorrow now. I'll be sending it tomorrow. And if you've got any further questions, any other points, anything at all, please do get in touch. It's been an absolute pleasure working with all of you. Thank you very much. I will miss our sessions, actually. I think you know, I think we've worked really well together, and I think it's worked quite well with the Zoom. It's not normally how I would deliver a full level 5, but I think it's worked out really well. So thank you so much for your support, and I know that you've you know, quite a lot of us, including me, we've had to work with issues with Zoom and the broadband and so on. But honestly, it's been amazing. And you'll have recordings, you've got the recordings anyway, so you can watch them at your leisure. Okay, so thank you very much indeed then. So I'm going to now log off now. If there's no final questions or anybody wants to say something.
Just thank you very much, Sunil.
Thank you, Shirley. Thank you so much indeed. Thank you so much for your support and your feedback. Thank you.
Great appreciation.
Thank you so much.
Many thanks, Sunil. Excellent.
Thank you, Grace. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Bye.
Take care.
Thanks,
Bye.
Sunil.
Thanks then. Bye, Vicky. All the best. I'll put that document in for you, Vicky, in the Padlet. Okay, I'll find it.
That'd be brilliant. Have we passed?
Yes, you have. Oh, well. Have I passed? Have I passed? No, honestly, yeah. There's no issue there. Everybody will get their completion certificates, etc. So there shouldn't be any issue there at all.
And Idem for you with flying colours.
With flying colours. That's right, Grace.
You get a distinction for being so enthusiastic for 5 days.
Well, I'm sorry. Well, guys, you really inspired me as well. And, you know, I mean, there's like degrees of distinctions in some of your presentations that really, really, you know, somehow exceeded the expectations and what we expected. But brilliant. It's my favourite part.
Can I just ask, who do we send the diary to?
Okay, I will put that in the email. I'll put all the info. It's a bit complicated, but I'll put it in the email as to what you need to do there. Okay, but not to worry about that. But if you can get those completed, brilliant stuff. Okay, guys. Any other questions?
All the best people are from Wolverhampton.
Ah, high five, Grace.
Virtual one.
Yeah.
You know me very well. I'm a local Wolvo boy. Yes. Yeah. Wolves are doing well.
I know.
Wolves are doing all right.
Yeah.
You know? Thank you, guys.
Take best care.
Thank you, and you, Grace.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you,
everybody.
Sunil.
Bye, Josh. Bye, Vicky.
Yeah.
Everyone.
Bye. Cheers.
Bye, everyone. Bye. Thank you, guys. All the very best of luck to you.
Bye.
All the very best of
Bye,
luck.
Sunil.
Everything goes smoothly. Thank you so much, Kathy. Hope everything goes smoothly for you as you transition back to the college. So thanks a lot. Thanks, Tariq. Thank you, Liz. Matthew, well done. Thanks, guys.